Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
She turned our anniversary into her cheating debut, then demanded I open our marriage or lose my son. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments, and if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I still remember the morning sun slanting through our bedroom window on what was supposed to be a blissful day. It was our 5th wedding anniversary, yet the warmth I expected to feel from Celeste was nowhere in sight. I got out of bed, stretching away the mild ache in my back, and glanced over at her. She was scrolling through her phone with a focused intensity, like she didn't even realize I was watching. "Morning," I said softly, forcing a smile. She lifted her eyes momentarily. "Oh, hey, Adrian." "Morning," she replied, but there was no warmth behind it. Then her gaze darted right back to her screen. I tried to brush off the discomfort, reminding myself to keep the day's plan in mind. I had a small surprise in store, a reservation at our favorite Italian bistro, plus an anniversary gift, a silver bracelet engraved with our wedding date and Ethan's birth date. It was understated but meaningful. Yet as I showered and dressed, a strange anxiety crept up on me. Celeste's energy was off, and it wasn't just morning grumpiness. She seemed distracted. Downstairs I found Ethan in his high chair, babbling excitedly about some cartoon he'd seen. He was 3 years old, full of that boundless toddler energy. I kissed the top of his head, inhaling the faint scent of baby shampoo. Parenting him had changed my world for the better, and at that moment I felt a flicker of reassurance. No matter how weird Celeste was acting, Ethan was my anchor. Celeste joined us in the kitchen, phone still in hand. She typed rapidly, pausing only when I placed a cup of coffee in front of her. "Thanks," she mumbled. Then she froze as if noticing the time. "I'm running late. I have to get to the call center early for a meeting." I furrowed my brow. "But it's our anniversary. Weren't we going to have breakfast together?" She ran a hand through her hair, looking exasperated. I know. The team lead changed the schedule last minute," she said. Her phone buzzed and she jolted, flipping it face down on the table. "We can still do dinner tonight, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, sure. We'll do dinner." A hollow feeling settled in my chest. I tried not to make a big deal out of it. Sometimes life just happens, I told myself. But the tension in my throat wouldn't ease. After she left, I tidied up the kitchen and dressed Ethan for daycare. While zipping up his jacket, I caught a glimpse of my phone lighting up. The bistro reservation reminder flashed on the screen. I felt a stab of doubt. Would Celeste even show up without making an excuse? At work, I found it nearly impossible to concentrate on my tasks as a production manager. My mind replayed Celeste's tense expression that morning. Halfway through the day, I grabbed my phone to send her a quick anniversary text. "Thinking of you. Happy 5 years, Cel. Can't wait for tonight." The message delivered but sat without a reply. Hours ticked by, and the ache in my stomach grew. By the time I wrapped up, I still hadn't heard from her. I hurried to pick up Ethan from daycare, anxious to see if she'd at least meet us at home. Pulling into our driveway, I noticed her car was already there. A rush of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Inside, Celeste was perched on the couch, phone in hand again. There was an open folder on the coffee table papers from her job, it appeared. She barely looked up when we entered, but Ethan ran straight to her. She managed a quick hug for him, then turned back to her phone. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting down Ethan's backpack. "Just swamped with some new policies at work," Celeste said, but her tone was clipped. Her phone buzzed again and she flipped it face down once more. I resisted the urge to ask who was texting her, telling myself not to be paranoid. We were married after all. If there was something serious, she'd tell me, right? Realizing it was almost dinner time, I looked at my watch. "So, about our anniversary dinner." Celeste stood abruptly. "Look, I have to finish these documents. Can we order in, or maybe, I don't know, do something low-key tonight?" I felt a lump form in my throat. "We had plans, Cel." "I made reservations at that place you love." She fidgeted with the folder. "I'm sorry. I really am. It's just the worst timing. My manager scheduled an early review for tomorrow. I can't afford to blow that off." I promise we'll do something special this weekend, okay? Her words sounded half-hearted, as if she was reading them off a script. The air felt stale with tension. In that moment, I noticed a fleeting flash on her phone, a glimpse of a notification bubble before she locked the screen. I caught the name Dominic in bold letters. My heart thumped uncomfortably. Is that work-related too? I asked quietly, nodding at her phone. She clenched her jaw. Yes, obviously. Dominic is just a co-worker, she muttered, then quickly changed the subject. Let's get takeout from the Thai place, all right? I'm too busy to dine out. I didn't push further. Something about her voice felt final. If I pressed her, it'd turn into a fight, and I didn't want to upset Ethan. But the uneasy feeling lingered as we went through the motions of ordering dinner. Even the way Celeste scrolled on her phone between bites of pad thai made my chest tighten. She was texting the entire time, pausing only to look up if Ethan giggled or dropped his spoon. Once dinner was done, Celeste retreated upstairs with her laptop. I put Ethan to bed, reading him his favorite story about a brave lion. I normally found comfort in these routines, but that evening the tension gnawed at me. After tucking him in, I stepped into the hallway, hearing muffled sounds from behind our bedroom door. My heart hammered. Was she on the phone with someone? I swallowed, deciding not to intrude. Instead, I went back downstairs and collapsed onto the couch, mentally replaying the day's events. Our 5th anniversary had all but evaporated into thin air, overshadowed by Celeste's shiftiness and constant phone use. My gaze drifted to the silver bracelet hidden in a small gift bag on the coffee table. I hadn't even gotten the chance to give it to her. Anger flickered within me, anger mixed with confusion and a tinge of fear. Something was wrong, undeniably so. But I told myself I was probably overthinking, that maybe Celeste really was swamped with a new project or new manager. Yet that name, Dominic, kept echoing in my mind. My phone buzzed, making me jump. It was a text from one of my close coworkers, Dylan, congratulating me on the big day and joking about how I should be off celebrating instead of reading work emails. I stared at the message, feeling a spike of bitterness. My big day had turned into a hollow facade. Before heading to sleep on the couch that night, I couldn't even bring myself to join Celeste in bed. I scrolled through my own phone. My thoughts churned with possible explanations for her odd behavior. I wanted so badly to find a rational reason, one that wasn't catastrophic, but there was no ignoring that uneasy hum in my chest. Something was breaking beneath the surface, and I was starting to suspect that no vow or promise could repair it if it truly cracked wide open. The next morning, I awoke with a stiff neck from sleeping on the couch. The living room was dim, the early sunlight just beginning to peek through the blinds. I rubbed the back of my neck, recalling how we used to cuddle in bed on weekends, especially after a special occasion like our anniversary. Those memories felt distant and almost imaginary now. I found Celeste in the kitchen, sipping coffee. She wore a robe, hair loosely tied back, eyes puffy like she'd barely slept. We exchanged a tense nod. No mention of last night, no apology, no acknowledgement of our missed dinner. The silence roared louder than any argument could have. Sitting down across from her, I mustered the courage to speak. I need to talk to you about last night. Our anniversary was... She held up a palm. Adrian, please, not this morning. I'm exhausted, and I still have an early shift. Can we not do this now? My heart pounded. The easy route would be to postpone again, but I felt the weight of the unspoken words pressing on my chest. I inhaled slowly. I have to know something. Who is Dominic? She looked stunned for a moment, then set her coffee down. I told you he's just someone from work. We're handling a new project together, that's all. I studied her face. Her voice sounded defensive and her eyes darted around nervously. Is that why you were texting him all night? Because it looked like more than a few messages. Don't start. Celeste stiffened, glancing away. He's new on my team and he had questions. It's urgent stuff, okay? Let's drop it. Something inside me snapped. No, we can't just drop it, Cel. Last night was our anniversary. You barely said 2 words to me. You were glued to your phone and all I saw was Dominic's name. Don't you think that's weird? She stood up abruptly, slamming the mug on the counter. Weird? I can't control when my coworkers reach out to me, Adrian. If you're feeling neglected, I'm sorry. But you're blowing this way out of proportion. The surge of anger left me momentarily speechless. I balled my fists at my sides, struggling to keep my voice even. I feel like something's off. You've been distant for weeks, always on your phone, always some new reason you're busy. If there's an issue between us, just tell me. She swallowed hard, then brushed past me. You're being paranoid. Not everything is some grand conspiracy, she muttered, heading for the stairs. I followed her. Paranoid? Is it paranoid to ask my wife why she's ignoring me on our anniversary? Is it paranoid to wonder if there's someone else? She spun around, eyes flashing. Don't you dare accuse me of... She stopped short, looking almost guilty for a split second before her expression hardened again. You think I'm cheating on you with Dominic? That's what this is about? I opened my mouth to respond, but hesitated. The truth was, I didn't know what to think. I'm asking if there's something going on. You tell me. She folded her arms, her jaw clenched. I kissed Dominic at a team outing once. It was in front of co-workers. It was stupid, just a playful dare, okay? It meant nothing. My stomach dropped. I expected a denial, a refusal, some kind of lie. Instead, she admitted to a kiss, labeling it playful. My mind reeled. You kissed him at work? For a dare? She waved a hand dismissively. You're overreacting. It was a silly team-building game. People were around. It's not like we were alone or like it was serious. Why are you making it a big deal? I felt my throat tighten, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. Anger and betrayal warred inside me. Because it is a big deal, I managed to say, voice cracking. A kiss isn't harmless when you're married, she huffed. Well, I didn't plan it, Adrian. It just happened. I was going to tell you eventually, but I knew you'd blow up just like you are now. That's why I've been avoiding a huge confrontation. I'm not cheating on you. If I were, do you think I'd be so open about texting him in front of you? Her logic felt twisted. I couldn't believe we were having this conversation at all. So that's it? A random dare at a work event, and that's why you two keep texting and calling? She shrugged, her tone icy. Work environment can be intense. We're just close colleagues now. Honestly, if you don't trust me, that's your problem. A pulse pounded in my temple. I think we both have a problem, I said quietly, stepping back. My eyes flickered to the living room where Ethan was. I could hear him babbling to himself, likely drawing with crayons. I forced myself to lower my voice. Look, I don't want to fight. I just want honesty. Celeste stiffened, glancing past me at the living room. She exhaled as though exasperated. Fine, you have your honesty. Yes, Dominic and I have been messaging a lot. Yes, we kissed that one time. But that's the extent of it. It's not cheating. If you want to make it into some huge scandal, go ahead. I can't stop you. Her words spilled over me like cold water. My mouth went dry. I need some air, I finally said, stepping away. Let's not pretend everything's fine. It's obviously not. She let out a dismissive snort as I walked off. In the hallway, I paused near Ethan. I watched him coloring a bright sun on a scrap of paper, cheerful and oblivious. My chest constricted. I had to be careful. Whatever was happening between Celeste and me would affect him if it escalated. But right then, I felt powerless to hold the marriage together. Celeste's flippant attitude stung worse than if she'd outright denied everything. She seemed to think I was the one overreacting. I needed to clear my head, so I grabbed my keys and slipped out the front door, inhaling the crisp morning air. The suburban street looked so ordinary, neighbors heading to work, a dog barking down the block, a school bus rumbling by. Yet inside my own house, a storm was brewing. Sinking into my car's front seat, I rummaged for a moment in the center console, finding an old photo strip from a county fair Celeste and I attended years ago before Ethan was born. In the pictures, we were beaming, hugging each other, making goofy faces. That was the Celeste I remembered. Where had she gone? My phone vibrated in my pocket. For a split second, I hoped it was Celeste texting to apologize. It wasn't. It was just a reminder from the local car service center about an oil change appointment next week. Real life doesn't pause when your marriage unravels, I thought bitterly. I started the engine, but I had nowhere urgent to go. I just needed space. As I drove around aimlessly, her words echoed in my mind. It's just a silly dare. It's not cheating. Yet my gut told me it was more than that. Because if it was innocent, Why did it feel like my entire world was tipping off balance? The drive to the diner on the outskirts of town took longer than it should have. I was still reluctant about going, but the message I'd received was clear. Raina Porter, Celeste's closest friend, had asked to meet. She claimed it was urgent and involved Celeste's well-being. A part of me knew this was likely some orchestrated gathering, yet my curiosity and a flicker of desperation pushed me to show up. Stepping inside the chrome-plated diner, I was hit with the comforting smell of bacon and coffee. The morning rush had dwindled, leaving only a handful of patrons scattered at booths. I spotted Raina immediately in a corner booth, sipping tea with a forced half-smile. Across from her sat two individuals I recognized only vaguely, a man and woman from Celeste's extended social circle. I recalled their names, Sean and Melissa, if I wasn't mistaken. "Adrian, over here!" Raina waved me over, her voice bright but her eyes tense. I slid into the vinyl seat facing them. "I was told you wanted to talk." "So talk." Raina glanced at the other two, then turned back to me. "Look, we all know things are tense between you and Celeste. She's in a rough spot, Adrian. We want to help." I suppressed a derisive snort. Help? That was rich coming from the group that Celeste was increasingly spending time with. I leaned forward. "What exactly do you think needs helping?" Melissa spoke up, her tone soothing. "Celeste's been, exploring. She's realized that maybe the boundaries of a traditional marriage feel restrictive. She's found a community of people who believe in more fluid, open connections." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. "Open connections?" I repeated. Raina nodded. "Yes. Look, I know that sounds shocking, but it's not some scandalous thing. It's a philosophy about trusting each other to experience personal freedom." I cut her off. "Wait, are you telling me Celeste's new hobby is basically open relationships?" My voice was sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. Sean raised his hands calmly. "It's not that black and white. None of us are forcing Celeste into anything. She's just curious. She sees how some of us share experiences with our partners to keep our relationships fresh." My jaw tightened. "By share experiences, you mean cheat on your spouses?" Raina's eyes flickered. "No one calls it cheating. Everyone involved is aware and consents. That's the point." A hollow laugh escaped me. "Well, I'm pretty sure I never consented to my wife kissing another guy or texting him all night on our anniversary. That's not exactly a mutual agreement, is it?" Melissa placed a hand on the table as if to calm me. "Look, we understand this is uncomfortable. Celeste wanted to talk to you about it, but she got scared. She thought you'd never accept the concept." "Because I wouldn't," I said bluntly. "I believe in our vows. She never mentioned anything about exploring open relationships at the altar." Did I miss that line? Raina sighed, looking genuinely troubled. "Adrian, we're not here to pick a fight. We care about Celeste, and we want you two to figure this out. Maybe there's a middle ground." "Middle ground?" I repeated, my heart pounding. "I'm sorry, but the middle ground between monogamy and cheating isn't exactly something I can sign up for. She's my wife. We have a child. We built a life on trust. If she wanted something different, she should have talked to me first instead of sneaking around." Sean cleared his throat. "From what Celeste told us, she did try to approach the subject, but you got angry." "That's not accurate," I snapped. "I got angry because she admitted to a kiss, acted like it was nothing, and basically told me I was overreacting. There was never a respectful, honest conversation. Just lies by omission." The three exchanged looks. Melissa ventured, "Could it be that Celeste's just experimenting with harmless flirtation? Maybe she's not fully stepping into an open relationship. She could be testing boundaries." "Harmless flirtation?" My voice rang louder than I intended, drawing a glance from a waitress across the diner. I lowered my volume, but the anger remained. "Listen, I'm not interested in a lecture on boundary testing. The bottom line is, she crossed a line. It's not harmless if it's destroying my trust." Raina leaned in, her brow knitted. "Adrian, we want you to give this a chance. Celeste is an amazing person, and she's been so much happier when she's with us. It's not about betraying you. It's about personal growth. Maybe if you see how it works, you'd understand." My chest constricted. "You want me to what? Join an open marriage group with you guys?" So I can watch my wife be with Dominic? That's insane. It's not insane, Sean insisted. Plenty of couples do it to revive their relationship. It brings them closer, ironically. There's no lying or hiding, everything is out in the open. I paused, the enormity of the suggestion crashing over me. So Celeste's plan, if you could call it that, was to lure me into their circle, under the guise of making us stronger. And she already messed up by letting me find out in the worst way possible. A wave of bitterness and betrayal surged. So that's the big pitch. I can have my wife as long as I'm willing to share her. I don't want to be rude, but that's not how I define marriage. Raina frowned, opening her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. Look, I'm sorry if this is normal to you guys, but it's not to me. And if Celeste is choosing this path, then she's the one who's changed the rules on me without my consent. Don't expect me to be grateful. Melissa tried to interject. Adrian, wait. No, I said, sliding out of the booth. I appreciate the attempt to help, but you're siding with her. The fact that none of you told me a thing until now shows that you prioritize your group's ideals over my marriage. I can't do this. Raina's expression melted into frustration. You're making a mistake. Celeste cares about you. She just wants more freedom in your relationship. I paused to glare at them. She should have talked to me first, I said, voice trembling, instead of letting me find out from suspicious texts and your group gatherings. If she wants your brand of freedom, she can have it, but it won't be with my blessing. Without waiting for an answer, I left the diner. My heart thumped erratically as I reached my car. The conversation felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Open marriage, harmless flirtation, personal growth, the words rattled around my head. As I slid behind the wheel, a swirl of emotion swept over me. Anger at the group's nerve, deep hurt at Celeste's deception, and even a pang of guilt. Had I become so blind that she felt she needed something else? No, I reminded myself. She made a choice to keep me in the dark. The question was, what did I do now? I forced myself to drive home carefully. My phone buzzed with a text I recognized Raina's number, but didn't bother reading it. The last thing I needed was another lecture about how I should accept Celeste's new lifestyle. Inside my head, though, seeds of resentment were taking root. If Celeste wanted to betray me, she'd find out soon enough that I wasn't just going to roll over and take it. If she thought she could outsmart me, well, she didn't know me as well as she thought. Because while I had no desire to harm anyone, I did have a stubborn streak and an engineer's mind for planning. A quiet but forceful determination settled into my chest. I wasn't going to lose everything I loved without a fight. When I got back from the diner meeting, I found Celeste in the living room with Ethan. She had a handful of crayons spread across the coffee table, and Ethan was scribbling an uneven rainbow across a piece of paper. They looked the picture of domestic warmth, like the betrayal of the past few days simply didn't exist. She glanced up at me, and her face fell slightly. "Where'd you go?" she asked, forcing a smile. "Out." I set my keys down. I wasn't in the mood to hash out the diner fiasco, especially not in front of Ethan. "Hope you had fun coloring, buddy," I said, crouching down to ruffle his hair. Ethan grinned, oblivious to the tension. "Mommy said I'm doing a good job," he declared proudly. "You are," I agreed, managing a small smile for him. Then I stood, eyeing Celeste. She shifted uneasily, probably sensing the conversation I'd had with Raina. Ethan wandered off to find a snack in the kitchen, and as soon as he was out of earshot, Celeste stood and faced me. "Adrian, I have something to tell you. I told Raina I needed some space from that group. It's been too much." I swallowed. That was unexpected. "So you're backing away from them?" She nodded, eyes downcast. "Yes. I know you don't trust me right now, but I'm trying to fix this. I realized how everything came out wrong." She hesitated. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I know the kiss was a huge breach of trust, but it wasn't a full-blown affair." Her apology sounded half-formed, more like an attempt to placate me. "You and Dominic are done then?" She paused, fiddling with the hem of her shirt. "We work together, so I can't just avoid him, but I'm not pursuing anything with him outside of work. I promise." I stared at her, trying to gauge sincerity. Part of me wanted to believe she was genuinely remorseful. The other part suspected she was just reacting to the confrontation. "So, what do you propose we do? Go back to normal?" She shook her head slowly. I understand if you need time to trust me again. I can sleep in the guest room for a while if that helps. My heart panged at the thought. I remembered our early years of marriage, snuggled under one blanket, whispering jokes at midnight. Now she was volunteering to banish herself to the guest room. I actually think I need the space, I said. Why don't I take the spare bedroom? I was the one who felt betrayed, after all. A flicker of surprise crossed her features. Adrian, It's fine. I cut her off, my tone gentler than before. I just can't sleep next to you right now, Sel. Everything feels wrong. I glanced toward the hall, thinking of the small spare bedroom we usually reserved for guests. I'll get my stuff. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but then closed it again. All right, she whispered, her shoulders sagging. Maybe we both need time to clear our heads. Without another word, I went upstairs and began gathering essentials. Clothes, my laptop, phone charger. The gravity of the moment hit me as I passed photos of us on the hallway wall, wedding pictures, baby pictures, a family trip to the beach. Each snapshot felt like a taunt, a reminder of what we used to be. I tried to swallow back the knot in my throat. Once inside the spare bedroom, I locked the door. The room smelled slightly musty from disuse, but it would be my refuge. I placed my folded clothes on the dresser and laid my laptop on the small desk. I flicked on a dusty lamp, noticing the dull glow it cast on the beige walls. The environment felt sterile, like I was in a stranger's house rather than my own. A text pinged on my phone. It was from an unfamiliar number. Unknown. Adrian, this is Winston Keene. Dylan gave me your contact. Let's talk about your situation. I specialize in private investigations. I reread the message, my pulse kicking up. Dylan was a co-worker who knew about my suspicions. Clearly, he wasted no time connecting me with someone who could help. The idea of hiring a private investigator felt dramatic, like something out of a movie. But the slow churn of dread in my stomach reminded me of the desperation I felt. Celeste's half-apology might not be the whole story. If there was more lurking beneath the surface, I needed proof, if only to protect Ethan from further instability. Before replying, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger. Gripping the phone tight, I typed back, "Me. Thanks for reaching out. Let's meet soon. I need all the help I can get." Setting the phone aside, I heaved a sigh. The decision to involve an investigator made my stomach clench, but after talking to her friends earlier, it was clear Celeste had been exploring something deeper than a single kiss. If she was telling the truth now, fine. But if she wasn't, I needed hard evidence. Betrayal was one thing. A web of lies that could jeopardize our family was another. The rest of the evening passed like a muted film. We kept up appearances for Ethan's sake. Celeste gave him a bath while I heated up leftovers. She seemed quieter, maybe even remorseful. After Ethan went to bed, we barely exchanged a word. I retreated to the spare bedroom, locking the door behind me to discourage her from trying to coax me back. Whether it was out of genuine guilt or a desire to keep the peace, I wasn't sure. I only knew I wasn't ready to let her back into my heart. Later, while scrolling through social media in bed, I spotted a photo Celeste posted weeks ago. A group from her call center, including Raina, Dominic, and a few others. They were all in a lounge, arms linked, looking carefree. Celeste's face shone with excitement, and Dominic was right next to her, their shoulders touching. My chest tightened. Had it started then, or maybe even earlier? I shut off the phone and stared at the ceiling. Thoughts of open marriage and secret text messages ran circles in my mind. I pictured Celeste's forced smile when she admitted to that kiss. But why did it feel like there was more she wasn't saying? Fatigue eventually took me, but sleep didn't come peacefully. I dreamt of Ethan asking me why Mommy looked so sad, only for Dominic to appear at our front door wearing a smug grin. In the dream, I couldn't speak. I just watched helplessly as Celeste walked away with him. When I jerked awake, my shirt was damp with sweat. The clock read 2:12 a.m. I got up to check on Ethan, quietly opening his bedroom door. The soft glow of a nightlight revealed him curled up with his stuffed dinosaur. My heart clenched with love and protectiveness. My son deserved a stable home, a mother and father who cared about each other even if we were going through a rough patch. But something told me this was more than a rough patch. This was a fracture, threatening to break our family apart. In that quiet moment, I made a private vow. No matter what happened with Celeste, I would protect Ethan, and if a storm was coming, I'd gather whatever strength and evidence I needed to weather it. Because once trust is broken, sometimes the only way to survive is to face the truth head-on, armed with a plan and unafraid of what you might uncover. I woke the next morning to the sunlight leaking through the spare bedroom's blinds, casting stripes across my face. I still wasn't used to waking up in this cramped space. My back ached from the smaller mattress. Glancing at the half-packed duffel bag on the chair, I remembered the vow I'd made. Protect Ethan. Uncover the truth. That vow led me to a phone call last night, scheduling an early appointment with Deborah Langley, a well-regarded family lawyer. By mid-morning, I found myself walking into Deborah's downtown office. The lobby had a neutral corporate vibe, light gray walls, framed degrees, plush chairs, and a faint whiff of coffee. A smiling receptionist, Jenna, ushered me back to Deborah's glass-walled office. Through the transparent walls, I saw a woman in her late 30s, hair neatly pulled back, wearing a sharp navy blazer as she typed away. Deborah stood up and extended her hand. "Adrian Fisher? Deborah Langley. Nice to meet you." She had a firm grip, a straightforward air about her. I settled into the chair opposite her desk, uncomfortably aware of my sweaty palms. "I appreciate you seeing me on such short notice," I said, clearing my throat. "Things at home are complicated." Deborah gave a quick nod, tapping a pen against a yellow legal pad. "Your message mentioned potential infidelity and a desire to know about custody options. Could you fill me in?" Where to begin? I inhaled slowly and summarized the last couple of weeks. Celeste's shift in behavior, the discovered kiss with Dominic, the unsettling group mentality, and my fear that she was heading towards something more destructive. When I mentioned Ethan, my voice caught slightly. "I just want to be sure that if things escalate, Ethan will be safe," I concluded. "He's only 3. Deborah jotted notes. "Makes sense. I handle a lot of divorces involving child custody. It can get messy, especially if a spouse claims wrongdoing, domestic violence, hidden assets, that sort of thing. It's good you're being proactive." Something about her efficient manner steadied me. "What are my options?" I asked. She leaned forward. "First, let's address the possibility of divorce. If you decide to file, the court will look at standard factors: length of the marriage, child's best interests, potential alimony, and so forth. If Celeste's infidelity is proven, it can influence the judge's perspective, especially for spousal support. But in many states, infidelity doesn't entirely determine the settlement. I tried to process all this. So even if she's cheating on me, I might still end up paying her alimony? In some cases, yes, though the presence of a child might shift how the financial support is divided," Deborah explained. "As for child custody, the court focuses on the child's well-being. If Celeste's activities put Ethan at emotional or physical risk, that's a serious factor in awarding custody." My stomach clenched. She's not physically abusive, but the environment these open marriage friends could be confusing for a toddler. Deborah scribbled more notes. "We can argue that. Judges take stability seriously. If we show Celeste's circle is detrimental, it'll strengthen your case." She paused, flipping a page on her legal pad. "I need to be straightforward. If Celeste fights back, she might allege that you're controlling or abusive. Sometimes people lie to gain leverage. We have to be ready." My pulse spiked, remembering how easily Celeste dismissed me as paranoid. "I'm not violent. I've never even raised a hand against her." My voice trembled at the thought of being falsely accused. Deborah offered a sympathetic nod. "That's good to hear. Still, these claims can appear out of nowhere, especially if your wife feels cornered. Gathering evidence is key: texts, phone logs, anything that proves her dishonesty or manipulative behavior." I thought about Winston Keene, the private investigator Dylan had connected me with. "I'm working with a PI. He suggested installing cameras or recording calls to gather evidence." Deborah's brow lifted. "That could be valuable within legal boundaries. I'd ensure the recordings comply with state laws. Typically, if you own the home, you can place cameras in common areas but not private areas like bathrooms. Also, it's best to let your investigator handle it so we preserve the chain of evidence. Courts like a clear record showing no tampering." "Understood," I replied, relief seeping in. I just want to be prepared in case Celeste tries to turn this around on me. Her expression softened. I get it. This is tough. If you choose to file for divorce soon, I can start drafting documents. We'd list irreconcilable differences, though I can also note the infidelity aspect. Just keep in mind that if you remain in the same house, tensions might escalate. I imagined life in the spare bedroom, indefinitely knots of anxiety, Celeste's forced smiles around Ethan, daily acts of suspicion. I can handle it for now, I said quietly. It's my house, too, and I don't want to leave Ethan alone with her new friends showing up. Deborah nodded and checked her watch. All right, Adrian. We'll take this one step at a time. I'll lay out possible custody scenarios and estimate child support. You mentioned you're a production manager, so you'll likely be providing some financial support if she's currently working fewer hours. Yeah, she's at a call center. She's not unemployed, but it pays less than my job, I explained. Deborah tapped her pen. I'll consider that. Any immediate questions? Running a hand through my hair, I sighed. Just how long does a divorce usually take? Uncontested ones can wrap up in under a year. Contested can drag on for more than a year, she said. It depends on Celeste's cooperation. If you want to proceed, we'll keep the evidence airtight. We finished up with some paperwork. Deborah handed me a folder labeled Fisher vs. Fisher Preliminary with a business card paperclipped on top. If anything urgent happens, call me directly. My paralegal, Brianna, will handle routine updates. I stood, feeling an odd mix of heaviness and relief. Thank you, I said. I never thought I'd be here, but thank you. Deborah offered a professional smile. I understand. We'll get through it. The sunlight outside felt harsher than before as I stepped onto the sidewalk. Clutching the folder, I pictured Celeste at home, spinning half-truths or texting Dominic. The path ahead looked daunting, but at least now I had a plan, an attorney who knew the ropes, and a PI ready to gather evidence. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me. The screen displayed Winston Keene's number. I answered, my voice still shaky. He spoke calmly, a quiet confidence in his tone. Adrian, I have some equipment ready. Are you available to meet tomorrow? I looked up at the blue sky. Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready. As I ended the call, my chest felt a fraction lighter. For the first time in days, I sensed a glimmer of control. Even if the storm kept building, at least I had a reliable umbrella, Deborah's legal expertise and Winston's investigative skills. I walked to my car, the weight of the folder reminding me that while the battle was just beginning, I wasn't alone anymore. The following afternoon, I drove across town to a small office park, Building 3, Suite 204, Winston Keene's domain. The lot was quiet, except for a distant whir of a lawnmower. Heading inside, I noticed the front office had a modest sign reading, Keene Investigative Services. A middle-aged man in a button-down shirt greeted me in the reception area. He had warm eyes, salt and pepper hair, and an air of calm authority. Adrian, right? He said, extending a hand. Winston Keene. I nodded. Thanks for seeing me, Winston. He led me to a back room cluttered with camera gear, file boxes, and a couple of monitors. The walls sported motivational posters like Perseverance and Truth Prevails, the kind I might have rolled my eyes at normally. But here, under Winston's quiet confidence, they felt reassuring. Dylan told me a bit about your situation, he began, gesturing for me to sit at a small round table. I gather you suspect your wife is involved with another man. Yeah, I muttered. Dominic Gray. I have partial proof photos of them kissing. But there's more to it. They're part of a group that encourages open relationships. My wife swears it's not an affair, but I don't buy it. She's changed so much. Winston nodded, taking out a notepad. And you mentioned wanting surveillance equipment at home? Right. Deborah, my attorney, says any footage should be properly documented and consistent with privacy laws. I'm worried Celeste might escalate things or claim I'm violent. A flicker of understanding crossed Winston's eyes. Seen that before. We'll keep it legal. Cameras in shared areas of your home living room, kitchen, hallways. I don't recommend bedroom cameras. It could complicate the chain of evidence, especially if intimate moments occur. He paused. We also do phone record analysis if you can access family plans, but that can get tricky with privacy rights. I ran a hand over my face. Okay, living room and hallways should be enough, Celeste and Dominic have no qualms about meeting in front of others, apparently. Winston rummaged in a metal cabinet, pulling out two small devices. These are discrete wireless cameras with audio capability. Each runs on a battery you'll need to replace every few days. They connect to an encrypted server, no local storage that Celeste could tamper with. He handed one to me, letting me see how small it was. I'll come by tomorrow to install them behind vents near corners of the ceiling. We can angle them to capture any interaction. You'll have a login to review footage, but I'll keep a master copy on my end. That way, if evidence is needed in court, the timestamps won't be questioned. I nodded, a knot of guilt tightening in my chest. I hate resorting to spying on my own wife, but I'm not sure how else to protect Ethan and myself. Winston gave a sympathetic smile. I understand. People lie to get what they want, especially when it comes to infidelity or custody. Better to have objective proof. I exhaled, running through mental images of Celeste sitting on our couch texting Dominic. What am I turning into, I wondered. But I pushed the doubt aside. So, about cost? Winston lifted a hand. Dylan told me you're good for it. We'll figure out a payment schedule. My priority is doing the job right. I do need a small deposit, though. That's fine, I said, relieved he wasn't pushing for an astronomical sum. After we get everything set up, how soon until I can start reviewing the footage? He shrugged. Same day, in theory. I'll give you a secure login. Just keep in mind, these cameras don't magically solve everything. We might capture hours of nothing. But if Celeste or Dominic shows up, or if she tries to claim you harmed her, we'll have the recordings. Understood. A wave of uneasy relief washed over me. This was it. I was crossing a line, installing secret cameras in my own home. The part of me that valued trust felt sick, but the part that needed truth and protection felt vindicated. We discussed a plan for Winston to come over when Celeste was out. I'd text him once she left for work in the morning. Then he'd mount the cameras, ensure everything functioned properly, and walk me through the monitoring process. As I stood to leave, Winston placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. This is tough, Adrian, but keep your head clear. People in turmoil make rash moves. The best revenge, if you will, is solid evidence that can't be refuted. I gave him a half smile. That's my hope. I just want to be sure I'm not blindsided by any more surprises. On my way out, I passed a younger employee, maybe a tech guy, fiddling with cables. He gave me a nod of acknowledgement, and I realized how normal this must be in Winston's line of work. Husbands, wives, business partners, anyone who suspects betrayal. It made me feel less alone, if only slightly. In my car, I checked my phone for texts from Celeste. Nothing. I suspected she was still at the call center, working or possibly chatting with Dominic. The bitterness flared again. Well, if they think they can keep me in the dark, we'll see how they handle a little real-world surveillance. The thought gave me a grim sense of purpose. I drove home imagining Winston and me systematically setting traps to catch Celeste's duplicity. The moral conflict nagged at me, but I brushed it aside. If she was innocent, we'd find out and all would be forgiven. But my instinct screamed otherwise. For the rest of the evening, I avoided Celeste's attempts at small talk. We mostly communicated through short answers about dinner or Ethan's bedtime. Inside, though, my nerves were on edge. The knowledge of Winston's upcoming visit felt like carrying a secret weapon. I just hoped it wouldn't blow up in my face. 2 days after I met Winston, my front door opened to the last people I expected or wanted to see: Dominic Gray and 3 members of Celeste's open marriage clique. I recognized Raina, Sean, and another woman with spiky hair named Bianca. They swept in around midday, right as I'd come back from picking up groceries. Celeste must have let them in because there they stood in my living room, looking oddly comfortable in my space. "What's going on here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart pounded at the sight of Dominic, tall, confident, with that irritating smugness in his eyes. Celeste sidled up next to him, wringing her hands. We wanted to talk," she said. Her tone was defensive, like she knew I wouldn't be pleased. Raina spoke first. "Adrian, we realize you have concerns about Celeste's choices, but we believe this is all a misunderstanding. We're here to clear the air." I glanced at Dominic, who stood with his arms crossed. He wasn't smiling. "So, You brought your friends as backup for a conversation in my house? I shot Celeste a sharp look. You didn't think to ask me first? Bianca stepped forward, fiddling with the zipper on her jacket. Look, we know how you feel about the open relationship idea, but Celeste told us things got pretty tense. We just want to explain it from our perspective. I swallowed, adrenaline surging. This is exactly the scenario Winston warned me about: unexpected confrontations. My phone was in my jacket pocket. I thought about starting a voice recording, but worried they'd catch me. Instead, I set down the grocery bags and squared my shoulders. Explain what? I said tersely. That you think it's okay to push me into sharing my wife with Dominic? I already made my stance clear. No, thank you. Sean tried a placating tone. It's not about forcing you. It's about letting Celeste explore who she is and inviting you to do the same. We keep hearing you're calling it cheating. It's not cheating if everyone's aware. I let out a humorless laugh. Everyone except me, apparently. I wasn't aware of anything until I found those pictures of Celeste and Dominic. Celeste glanced away, guilt flickering across her face. Dominic, on the other hand, smirked. You're making it bigger than it is, he drawled. Celeste and I only shared a moment. You could have the same freedom with someone else if you joined us. At that, I felt anger flaring in my chest, but I forced myself to stay cool. I'm not interested in moments with strangers, Dominic. And this is my house. You don't get to barge in and tell me what my marriage should look like. Raina held up her palms as if trying to broker peace. We aren't barging in to provoke you. We just want to keep this civil. We know couples who overcame issues by exploring open relationships together. It revived their connection. Revived, I repeated, letting the word hang. I turned to Celeste. Is that what you think our marriage needs? Some sort of revival by hooking up with Dominic and his group? She looked torn, eyes darting between me and her friends. I didn't invite them to corner you like this. They wanted to talk, and I thought maybe it would help. I'm tired of the tension in the house. My chest tightened. So this is your solution? A gang intervention? Suddenly, Dominic stepped in front of me, voice low. You don't have to be so hostile. If you can just keep an open mind, we can find a path that works for everyone. But if you keep resisting, you'll make Celeste miserable. I stiffened. Don't walk up on me like that. His eyes flickered with a challenge. Or what? He taunted. Before I realized it, Sean and Bianca closed ranks, as if preparing to break up a fight. Raina hovered by Celeste, looking anxious. A slow, threatening energy filled the living room. Keep calm, I reminded myself. Don't give them ammo to accuse you of violence. I inhaled, stepping back. Look, you all need to leave, I said quietly. I'm not discussing this any further. Dominic narrowed his eyes. We're not done. Then, in a flash of movement, Bianca and Sean grabbed my arms. My pulse rocketed. Hey, get off me! I barked, straining. They were strong, or at least determined. I felt my phone slip in my pocket. I couldn't reach it. Raina and Celeste looked on in alarm, but neither moved to stop it. Dominic snatched my phone from my jacket and flicked through it. Recording anything? He muttered. He found the voice recorder app. I watched in horror as he tapped to confirm if it was on. It wasn't. Thankfully I hadn't started recording, but that didn't ease the invasion I felt. Let me go, I growled, voice shaking with anger. Dominic smirked as he tossed the phone onto the couch. We just wanted to make sure you're not trying to trap us. Sean and Bianca released me. My arms throbbed from how tightly they'd gripped me. Raina finally stepped forward, looking apologetic. We didn't mean to scare you. We just can't risk private conversations leaking. Please understand. Understand? I breathed, massaging my sore arms. I understand you came into my home, laid hands on me, and rummaged through my phone. That's assault. You think that's how you win me over? Celeste blanched. Adrian, I didn't know they'd do that. I'm sorry. Dominic shrugged, showing zero remorse. We'll leave, he said. But you should think about what you want, Adrian. Celeste is part of our group. If you make this ugly, it won't end well for you. My jaw tightened as they filed out, Raina giving me one last apologetic glance. Celeste trailed behind them, pausing at the door. Her eyes glistened with tears, but she said nothing before stepping outside. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone, adrenaline roaring through my veins. I leaned on the back of the couch, trying to steady my breathing. They had come at me in my own house, rummaged my phone, laid hands on me, and Celeste just stood there, letting it happen. Any lingering hope that she'd revert to the woman I married vanished. She'd chosen them over me. I fought the urge to punch the wall or throw something. Instead, I grabbed my phone. No cracks, but the betrayal felt carved into my bones. They're dangerous, I realized. This wasn't a simple matter of open-minded folks. They were protective, maybe even cult-like in how they followed Dominic's lead. One thing was certain. I couldn't live like this anymore. Their intrusion fueled a new surge of determination. I needed to take the next legal step, if only to prevent them from blindsiding me again. I would contact Deborah first thing in the morning, and if Celeste had any doubts about where we stood, she'd learn soon enough. Early the next day, I called Deborah's office, my voice still edgy with the leftover fear and rage from yesterday's confrontation. The moment she picked up, I recounted the unwanted visit from Dominic and his friends, leaving out no detail about how they grabbed me or snatched my phone. Even over the line, I could hear Deborah's anger simmering. "They physically restrained you in your own home," she repeated, her tone sharp. "And Celeste didn't intervene?" I shook my head, forgetting momentarily she couldn't see me. She just stood there. She looked upset, but didn't lift a finger to help. Deborah sighed. "That's a serious escalation. We should consider filing a protective order, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. You still want to file for divorce?" "Yes," I answered firmly. "I can't keep living in fear that they'll barge in again. It's not just me, Ethan's only 3. I don't want him around their aggression. Even if they don't hurt him physically, that environment is toxic." "Agreed," Deborah said, scribbling notes. "We'll move quickly. I'll prepare the divorce petition citing irreconcilable differences, with a note about your concerns for Ethan's well-being. We'll request temporary custody arrangements right away. We can't guarantee immediate results, but it'll signal to the court that you have genuine safety concerns." A weighted relief settled over me. "Thank you. I just want to do what's best for Ethan." She cleared her throat. "We'll also ask the court to prevent any third parties like Dominic from being unsupervised around Ethan. Judges are usually cautious about that if there's evidence of aggression." An hour later, I drove to Deborah's office, picking up the finalized paperwork. Her paralegal, Brianna, a brisk, no-nonsense woman with a headset, handed me a neat stack of documents. "Read through, sign here," she instructed, pointing to a small tab. "Deborah will handle the filing, but your signature is needed." I flipped through the pages. My stomach twisted at the language. Petitioner has reason to believe respondent's environment is detrimental. Petitioner seeks sole or primary custody. It was unsettling and sad, seeing my marriage formalized as a broken contract. But every line reaffirmed my decision. Once I scrawled my signature, there was no going back. When I left the office, Deborah walked me to the door. "We'll serve Celeste at her workplace or home. Where would you prefer?" I thought for a moment. Serving her at home could provoke another confrontation, especially if Dominic and the gang were around. But at her job, she'd be caught off guard. "At her call center," I said. "She'll likely be less dramatic there." Deborah nodded. "All right. I'll arrange service by the end of the week. Expect a strong reaction. Most people don't take kindly to being served in front of coworkers. If she tries to contact you, remain calm. Don't argue. Keep your phone on you at all times in case you need to record anything." "Got it," I replied. My voice felt distant, like I was giving instructions to someone else. This was real, now more than ever. The next few days passed in a tense fog. I kept to myself in the spare bedroom, avoiding Celeste as much as possible. She seemed to sense a shift in my demeanor. Maybe she noticed the calm determination that replaced my earlier confusion. We barely exchanged words, speaking only about Ethan's meals or bedtime. It was like living with a stranger who held the keys to half my life. By Thursday evening, I knew Deborah's process server had likely handed Celeste the divorce papers at her call center. Sure enough, just past 6 o'clock, she burst through the front door, face flushed, holding a stack of official-looking documents. Her eyes locked onto mine. "You're divorcing me?" she demanded, voice shaking. "You couldn't even talk to me first? You just blindsided me at work?" I remained seated at the kitchen table, trying not to flinch at her anger. "I did talk to you," I said quietly. "You didn't listen, and your friends physically attacked me in our own house. I can't do this anymore. Her knuckles whitened on the papers. You know I didn't want them to hurt you. That wasn't my idea. I let out a bitter laugh. Yet you did nothing to stop it. Face it, Celeste. You chose them. You always do. She swallowed hard, tears forming at the edges of her eyes. This is insane. Don't you realize you're blowing up our entire life? Ethan's life? I clenched my jaw, fighting guilt. And what about you blowing up our life? Kissing Dominic, inviting those people in to harass me, lying to me for weeks? She shook her head. I was never lying. You just never gave me a chance to explain. This is all because of your jealousy. Call it what you want, I replied. It's done, Celeste. I'm seeking custody of Ethan, too. This environment isn't right for him. At the mention of custody, her tearful expression hardened. Oh, so you think you can take my son away from me? Good luck with that. I stood up, blood rushing in my ears. He's our son, and I'm not taking him away. I'm protecting him. If you truly cared, you wouldn't let Dominic and the others waltz in and threaten me. She glared at me, tears now streaming down her cheeks. You're going to regret this, she hissed. I promise you, Adrian. Before I could respond, she stormed upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the door to the master bedroom slam, followed by muffled sobs. I sank back into the chair, heart hammering. Those final words echoed in my mind. You're going to regret this. I had no idea what form that regret might take: false allegations, sabotage, or something else. But I resolved not to let fear derail me. Winston's cameras were up and running. Deborah was prepared. My main worry was Ethan, who was napping in his room, blissfully unaware of the raging storm downstairs. I cleared the table, trying to calm the trembling in my hands. Serving the papers felt like stepping off a cliff once you jump. There's no going back. But as I glanced at the muted living room camera barely noticeable near a ceiling vent, I held on to the hope that in the end, truth and evidence would be on my side. The tension in the house was palpable after Celeste had been served with divorce papers. Every day felt like walking across cracked ice, never sure when a hidden depth might swallow me up. The spare bedroom I occupied looked more lived in now. Scattered notebooks, a half-open laptop showing timestamps from my newly installed cameras, a drawer stuffed with clothes I no longer shared with my wife. One humid afternoon, I quietly slipped into the living room while Celeste was at work. Winston Keene, the private investigator, had texted me earlier to say that he had new footage ready for review. After confirming Ethan was happily playing next door at my neighbor Sharon's place, I grabbed a seat on the couch, connected my laptop to Winston's secure portal, and clicked on the most recent recordings. At first, the screen displayed normal household scenes: Celeste pacing around, talking on the phone, occasionally rummaging in the kitchen. But then, a new entry from 2 nights ago caught my eye. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. My heart pounded as the grainy nighttime footage revealed Celeste entering the living room followed by Dominic Gray. They were both speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough. Dominic was complaining about how difficult I was being, while Celeste said something about money and the divorce. The two of them stood intimately close near the coffee table. I gritted my teeth at the sight of Dominic, casual in a jacket he'd slung over a dining chair like he owned my home. The camera's angle missed their faces whenever they leaned in, but it didn't miss their body language. The closeness, the brush of shoulders, the soft laughter Celeste rarely gave me these days. They stayed that way for nearly half an hour before slipping out of frame. Judging by the shift in conversation, they might have moved to the hallway or the stairs. My stomach twisted in anger and heartbreak. Even amid divorce proceedings, Celeste had no qualms about sneaking Dominic in at night. This was precisely the kind of evidence Winston predicted we'd uncover. A beep signaled the end of the clip. I sat back, exhaling heavily. Winston's system automatically extracted relevant highlights into short segments. Apparently, he'd flagged this entire half hour as significant. No wonder. It confirmed Celeste was still deeply involved with Dominic. Within minutes, Winston's name popped up on my phone screen. I answered quickly, my voice raw. Adrian, he greeted, a calm steadiness in his tone. I assume you watched the footage? I nodded, forgetting he couldn't see me. Yeah, I did. It's worse than I thought. She's letting him in at midnight, Winston, in my house. There was a momentary pause. Adrian, I know it's difficult to see, but from a legal standpoint, it strengthens your case. It shows Celeste is continuing her affair during the divorce. If she claims any moral high ground or denies the affair, we have timestamps that say otherwise. My hand gripped the phone tighter. I feel sick. Is it strong enough as evidence if Celeste tries something extreme? Winston's voice turned pragmatic. Yes, if she alleges domestic abuse or tries for sole custody, we can rebut her credibility by showing her ongoing dishonesty and the presence of a paramour in the marital home. Judges don't like seeing a spouse act in bad faith, especially if children are involved. That's what I'm most worried about, I admitted. Ethan, I mean. He's 4 next month. I just don't want him caught in all this. You're doing what you can, Winston assured. We'll keep gathering evidence. Let's also make sure we get clear audio next time. I'll tweak the living room mic sensitivity. By the way, how's Deborah holding up with the court schedule? She's on top of it, I said. But everything's moving slowly right now. A first hearing is coming soon to handle initial custody arrangements. Good. Just keep me posted, Winston replied. And Adrian, take care of yourself. Evidence is valuable, but so is your mental health. I thanked him, then ended the call. For a few minutes, I just sat in numb silence, letting the reality settle in. My wife and Dominic had no intention of being discreet. If they thought I'd retreat meekly, they were mistaken. Winston's arsenal of footage could dismantle Celeste's lies if she dared to go nuclear, and something in me sensed that might happen soon. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from my neighbor Sharon, who was babysitting Ethan. He's tired, might want his nap soon. Right, my son, time to refocus. I brushed away the bitter resentment swirling in my chest, locked the laptop, and went to pick Ethan up. In Sharon's tidy living room, Ethan was curled up on the sofa with a juice box. He grinned when he saw me, and my heart clenched with both love and guilt. I hated that he sensed my tension at home. Thanks for watching him, I told Sharon, who waved me off kindly. Anytime, you know that. Everything all right? I forced a small smile. We're managing. Sharon nodded sympathetically. She knew more than she let on, having occasionally seen Celeste come and go at odd hours. I took Ethan's hand and we returned home. On the short walk across the driveways, he asked, "Daddy, when is Mommy coming home?" My chest tightened. "Probably soon, buddy. She's busy with work." He seemed to accept that, eyes already drooping with fatigue. Once we were inside, I guided him upstairs for a nap. The spare bedroom I used was across the hall, where the air felt colder, more sterile. Tucking Ethan into his own bed, I watched him drift off, torn between relief at having him safe and despair that our family was so fractured. Later downstairs, I opened a fresh notebook to jot down points for Deborah. Late-night visit by Dominic, date, time. Conversation about money and the divorce potential blackmail or intimidation. Impact on Ethan if Dominic stays over regularly. It felt methodical, almost mechanical. Part of me resented having to do this, but if Celeste wanted to hide behind a facade of innocence, I'd expose the truth. Slowly but surely, a vengeful spark inside me grew. I wasn't a violent man, never had been, but my sense of betrayal demanded a reckoning, one that involved carefully orchestrated evidence rather than rash outbursts. I would not be blindsided again. Sunset light streamed through the living room windows, casting the shadows of tree branches across the walls. I realized how empty the house felt. Another day, another swirl of tension. I dreaded the possibility of Celeste walking in with that smug confidence I'd seen her adopt when Dominic was around. But at the same time, I almost hoped she would, so my cameras could capture more of her duplicity, fueling my plan step by step. Regardless of what happened next, I was done playing the victim. Let them come. Let them try to twist the narrative. I had Winston. I had the video logs. I had Deborah's strategic mind. And most importantly, I had the willpower to see this through, for Ethan's sake and for my own. In my gut, I felt the first stirrings of an unyielding resolve, call it my revenge ethos, if you will. I'd do whatever it took to ensure Celeste faced the consequences for tearing our family apart. Let the cameras roll and the legal briefs stack up. We were just getting started. The next week crawled by in an unsteady routine. Every time Celeste and I crossed paths at home, the atmosphere seethed with resentment. She rarely spoke unless it involved Ethan. Sometimes I'd catch a fleeting flash of guilt in her eyes, other times, a glint of defiance. It was impossible to tell which face she'd wear on any given day. By Thursday, I had a scheduled video conference with Deborah to review the custody hearing date. Right as I was signing on, my phone rang. The call was from an unknown number. Reluctantly, I answered. "Is this Adrian Fisher?" asked a calm yet formal voice. "Yes," I replied warily. "Who's calling?" "This is Deputy Silva from the County Sheriff's Office. We need you to come down for questioning regarding a domestic complaint filed by your wife, Celeste Fisher." My stomach lurched. "Domestic complaint? What is she claiming?" The deputy's tone stayed neutral. "She's alleged that you threatened her with physical harm and have been emotionally abusive. A temporary restraining order is being processed. You're required to appear at the station within the next 24 hours to discuss the matter." I stared at the phone in shock. My breath caught in my throat. Physical harm? Me? I'd never so much as shoved Celeste in an argument. Yet here I was, hearing the worst-case scenario Deborah had warned about. My mind reeled, trying to recall every recent interaction. We'd had no fights involving physical contact, certainly no threats. This had to be an outright fabrication. I'll come by," I forced out, voice trembling. "I deny all accusations. I have evidence that nothing like that happened." The deputy gave a polite acknowledgement and ended the call. My head spun. Within seconds, the reality set in. A restraining order could mean losing access to Ethan, even if only temporarily. My pulse thundered as I emailed Deborah in all caps. Urgent Celeste filed false abuse allegations and asked for an immediate callback. Less than 5 minutes later, Deborah's face appeared on my screen as she joined the scheduled video conference. She looked concerned. "I got your message, Adrian. Tell me everything." My words tumbled out in a frantic rush. She listened, eyes narrowing. "All right, calm down. This is serious but not insurmountable. We have Winston's footage, correct?" "Yes, from multiple cameras. None show any sign of violence, obviously." I fought to keep my voice steady. Deborah nodded. "Then that's our best defense. The judge will want to see proof. In family court, these allegations can shift custody arrangements instantly, especially if Celeste claims she's in danger. We'll push for an emergency hearing to refute it using Winston's recordings." My heart hammered. And what if a judge grants her the temporary order before we can show the footage? That might mean I can't be near Ethan. She pursed her lips. "If it's a typical restraining order, yes. But it's usually short-term until a hearing is set. We'll file an immediate objection along with the compiled evidence. Keep your recordings easily accessible." I exhaled shakily, processing the gravity of the situation. "I'll do whatever it takes." Deborah's expression was resolute. "Then here's the plan. Go to the station as required, remain calm, and don't say more than necessary. State that you have an attorney. Give them my contact details. Don't give a statement without me. Meanwhile, Winston can prepare a formal summary of all the video logs from the last month, showing no incidents of violence." A knock sounded at my bedroom door. My laptop wobbled on the desk as Celeste's voice broke through. "Adrian, can we talk?" I stared at Deborah on the screen. She nodded, urging me to handle it carefully. I muted the microphone, stood up, and opened the door just enough to see Celeste's face. Her makeup was smudged, eyes red. She looked like she'd been crying. "May I come in?" she asked softly. I hesitated. "I'm in the middle of a call." "What do you need?" she sniffled. I need to explain something." A wave of anger threatened to bubble up. Explain? As if claiming I was a threat needed some gentle justification. But I stepped into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind me. "I'm listening," I said, crossing my arms. Celeste glanced away. "I did something drastic, but you forced my hand. You're trying to divorce me, claim I'm unfit to raise Ethan, embarrass me in court." I cut her off, voice trembling. "So your response is to lie about me being violent?" Her gaze snapped up. "It's not a lie," she insisted, though her voice quavered. "You're unstable, Adrian. You've been sneaking around, setting cameras." My jaw clenched. "You were the ones who physically restrained me. You and your friends, remember?" She faltered. "That was to protect Dominic. You were the aggressive one from the start." I wanted to scream at the sheer absurdity, but forced myself to remain composed. "Celeste, you can't rewrite history. None of that happened the way you're claiming. And we have proof," I said quietly. Her eyes widened, flickering with apprehension. Proof? Winston's cameras. If you think you're going to paint me as violent, good luck with the footage. We have it all. You and Dominic meeting up at midnight, you letting your friends manhandle me in our living room, everything. Her face paled, tears shining in her eyes again. You'd show that in court? I almost laughed at how brazen the question was. You left me no choice. You want to keep Ethan from me, Celeste. That's crossing a line. I have to defend myself. She stared at me, breathing heavily, then stormed off without another word. The moment she disappeared around the corner, I let out a shaky breath. My phone chimed with a text from Deborah. Stay strong. We'll file the formal objection ASAP. Stepping back into the spare bedroom, I resumed the call with Deborah. She reaffirmed next steps, reminding me that the hearing might be called on short notice. I'd have to gather all relevant video clips, compile them with Winston's help, and remain vigilant. When the call ended, I was left in a swirling storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, fear, but also a small sense of vindication that Winston's cameras had captured the truth. If Celeste intended to paint me as an abuser, she'd find herself cornered by her own lies. Late that evening, after Ethan was asleep, I paced the spare bedroom, replaying the day's events in my mind. A throbbing headache lingered behind my eyes. The thought of losing even temporary custody of Ethan terrified me, but I anchored myself to Winston's recordings like a lifeline. If Celeste had forced my hand, I'd show the courts how wrong she was. Outside the locked door, I heard Celeste moving around, presumably heading to the master bedroom alone. In the distance, a car engine revved, maybe Dominic's. My skin prickled at the thought of him stepping back inside. But one glance at the camera feed on my laptop gave me a cold reassurance. If Dominic returned tonight, we'd catch every second of it. And soon enough, Celeste's false accusations would crumble under the weight of her own duplicity. 4 days after Celeste filed her false complaint, the court hearing for the restraining order was scheduled. It came swiftly, though not swiftly enough for me. During that waiting period, Celeste insisted I avoid contact unless it involved Ethan. She spent most nights outside the home God knows where, and the tension only grew whenever we exchanged even a handful of words. When the hearing date arrived, I stepped into the family courthouse with Deborah at my side. I felt the cool, sterile air against my skin. The hallway buzzed with murmured conversations, an undercurrent of anxiety that seemed universal to everyone there, couples with issues, parents fighting for custody, attorneys flipping through papers. Inside the small courtroom, Celeste sat at a table with her attorney, a tall man in a pinstripe suit whose expression gave nothing away. On my side, Deborah arranged her notes calmly. Winston sat behind us, carrying a laptop and folders with carefully labeled evidence. My heart thumped as the judge, a gray-haired woman with piercing eyes, called the hearing to order. Celeste's attorney rose first, painting me as a jealous, controlling husband. He cited Celeste's statement that I barged into her personal affairs, installed secret cameras, and threatened her physically. I forced myself to keep a neutral expression, though anger churned in my stomach. The judge jotted notes as Celeste's attorney concluded that Celeste feared for her safety and needed a restraining order to protect herself and possibly Ethan. Deborah stood next. Your Honor, my client firmly denies these accusations. We've prepared video evidence that directly contradicts Miss Fisher's claims. With your permission, we'd like to present these recordings now. A flicker of interest crossed the judge's face. Proceed. Winston stepped forward, connecting his laptop to a monitor facing the judge. The tension in the room rose as the first clip played. Celeste and Dominic forcibly rummaging through my phone in our living room, with her friend group restraining me. The audio was muffled, but you could hear me protesting calmly, and them threatening me to ensure I wasn't recording. Watching it unfold publicly made my skin crawl, yet it was also vindicating. The judge's eyes narrowed at the sight of me being held. Celeste avoided looking at the screen entirely. Her attorney cleared his throat, clearly unsettled that his client's version wasn't matching the footage. Deborah pressed a key, skipping to another clip. Celeste walking in with Dominic late at night, the two whispering and laughing in the living room. While it didn't show direct abuse from her side, it illustrated how willingly she was engaging in questionable behavior and how I was nowhere near them, let alone threatening her. Finally, Deborah presented a time-stamped summary Winston compiled. Your Honor, these recordings cover the period Miss Fisher claims she was in immediate danger of physical harm. As you can see, there is no moment where Mr. Fisher raises a hand or threatens Miss Fisher. Quite the opposite on multiple occasions, Miss Fisher and her companions exhibit hostile behavior toward Mr. Fisher. Celeste's attorney tried to intercept, claiming privacy violations, but Deborah countered, the home is jointly owned, and the cameras are in common areas. Mr. Fisher's legal right to install surveillance in these spaces is established. We also have reason to believe Miss Fisher was attempting to entrap him with false allegations. The judge leaned forward, scanning documents Winston handed over. A hush fell in the courtroom. Finally, she peered over her glasses at Celeste. Miss Fisher, your statements indicate ongoing fear. Yet in these videos, you appear to remain in the home willingly, even bringing another individual in repeatedly. Could you clarify? Celeste's cheeks burned red. She stammered, It's complicated. Adrian's controlling. He put cameras everywhere to spy on me. I didn't know what he was capable of. The judge arched a brow. I see no evidence of direct threats in these recordings. If your argument is simply that Mr. Fisher's presence with cameras is intimidating, that's not the same as physical abuse or issuing verbal threats. We need credible proof if you want a restraining order. Celeste's attorney fumbled, flipping pages, but Deborah was quicker. Your Honor, we respectfully request the court to dismiss Miss Fisher's petition. The burden of proof for domestic violence or credible threat has not been met. A beat passed, punctuated only by the distant shuffle of papers. The judge nodded slowly, her expression stern. I agree. The petition for a restraining order is denied. Furthermore, Miss Fisher, I caution you that making false allegations in family court is a serious matter. I will not rule on that aspect today, but your credibility is now in question for any subsequent hearings, including custody. Celeste's face was ashen. She stared at the table, hands trembling. Her attorney placed a hand on her shoulder, murmuring something inaudible. Meanwhile, a surge of relief coursed through me. I could practically feel the tension draining from my shoulders as Deborah patted my arm gently. We left the courtroom, stepping out into the bustling hallway. Winston followed, giving me a nod. That went about as well as we could have hoped, he whispered. You okay? I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. Yeah, I think so. Just shaken. Even though I'd won this round, it felt surreal. Deborah offered a thin smile. The judge's reaction was decisive. Celeste overplayed her hand. This will set a precedent. Her credibility is damaged, especially if she tries more allegations. I glanced back, noticing Celeste still seated at the table, head bowed. For a moment, pity flickered in my chest. We'd once been happy, raising Ethan in a house filled with warmth and laughter. Now she was pinned under the weight of her own lies. Part of me felt sorry, but a larger part remembered what she tried to do, take Ethan away by painting me as a monster. Winston gave me a gentle nudge. Let's get out of here. You don't owe her a post-court audience. He was right. I turned and headed toward the elevator, Deborah at my side, feeling the oppressive tension recede with each step. My phone vibrated in my pocket, an unknown number again. For a split second, I feared it might be the sheriff's office. But I checked the screen. It was a local area code, probably a small detail I'd handle later. For now, I allowed myself a moment of triumph. Celeste's plan to cripple me with false accusations had fallen flat, and I was still standing, still able to be with Ethan. We stepped outside the courthouse, where the midday sun felt bright and hopeful. In my mind, I saw that incriminating footage playing on the courtroom monitor, Celeste's side torn apart by undeniable truth. I vowed never to be caught unprepared again. Late that evening, I sat in the cluttered spare bedroom, adrenaline from the court victory still humming in my veins. A dozen thoughts warred in my mind, relief at avoiding the restraining order, anger at Celeste's betrayal, fear for what she might do next. As I paged through old text messages, a new message popped up from an unknown contact. Unknown. Adrian. I work with Celeste at the call center. I have info about your divorce situation. Please meet me Parkside Diner tomorrow at 6 p.m. I can't text more. It's important. My pulse quickened. Could this be a trap? Or maybe someone offering genuine help? The mention of info about the divorce piqued my curiosity. I recalled how Deborah had mentioned we might find coworkers who'd witnessed Celeste's interactions with Dominic or others. Perhaps this was such a lead. After a moment's hesitation, I typed back, "Me. Who are you? Why should I trust you?" A few minutes ticked by. Then, unknown. "My name is Kara Jensen. I know about Conrad Milton and Dominic. Please, it's safer to talk in person. Conrad Milton." The name sounded vaguely familiar. I tried to place it. Then it hit me. Celeste's manager. I remembered Celeste mentioning Conrad once or twice as the call center supervisor, rumored to have had affairs with multiple employees. If this Kara had intel on him, it might connect directly to the environment that fueled Celeste's choices. I texted a quick agreement. 6 p.m. tomorrow, Parkside Diner. Then I shot off an email to Deborah, letting her know I had a potential tip. She replied within minutes, advising caution, but encouraging me to hear what the coworker had to say, especially if it bolstered our argument that Celeste's workplace environment played a role in her betrayal. The next day, I arranged for a sitter, my neighbor Sharon again, to watch Ethan, using the excuse of work errands. By 6 o'clock sharp, I was sliding into a booth at Parkside Diner, a modest spot with neon signage and a homey vibe. Families chatted over burgers, and a waitress refilled coffee cups with a practiced smile. I scanned the tables, wondering which face belonged to Kara Jensen. A woman in her late 20s, chestnut hair pulled into a ponytail, approached my booth. Her eyes darted anxiously. "Adrian Fisher, I'm Kara." I gestured for her to sit. "Thanks for coming," I said quietly. "How do you know Celeste?" She slid into the seat across from me, hands trembling slightly. "We both work in customer support at the call center. I've been there about 3 years. Celeste joined after me and eventually moved to Dominic's training group, but I stayed under Conrad's management." I studied her face, trying to decide if I could trust her. Her gaze was earnest, if somewhat fearful. "So, Dominic is a trainer?" she scoffed. "Technically, yes. But in reality, he's more like Conrad's right-hand man. Let's just say they recruit certain employees for after-work events. Celeste got swept up in that. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen." My heart thudded. "After-work events? Like the gatherings Celeste attends with that group?" Kara nodded, lowering her voice. "Exactly. Conrad's known for hosting these social mixers at clubs or rented suites. They pitch it as a way to bond and blow off steam. But from what I hear, it's basically a pipeline for partying, hooking up, sometimes worse. Multiple employees are involved. Some are married, some not." I swallowed hard. "And Celeste? She's part of that?" She sighed. "She started going a few months back. Dominic took a special interest in her. Everyone could see it. Before long, they were well, you know. And Conrad encourages it, believes it fosters employee loyalty. It's all hush-hush, though. Most folks pretend it doesn't exist." Leaning forward, I forced my voice calm. "How does this help me with the divorce?" Kara glanced around, nervous. "I overheard Celeste talking to Conrad about leveraging these mixers to smear you. Conrad apparently told her to gather statements from colleagues, claiming you harassed her or threatened Dominic out of jealousy. He said they'd all back her version to protect the brand. He specifically used those words, protect the brand." My stomach churned. So Celeste's call center environment was not just condoning, but actively encouraging manipulation to keep the scandal hidden. "So they're basically willing to lie in court for her," I said, a wave of disgust hitting me. Kara nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, people are scared of Conrad. He's got connections in management, maybe even corporate. If you cross him, you get blackballed or your schedule gets unbearable. He wields a lot of power for a call center manager." The puzzle pieces snapped into place. Celeste's turn to the group wasn't purely romantic or personal. It was also about workplace pressure. Still, it didn't excuse her betrayal, but it offered a bigger picture of who was pulling the strings. If Conrad and Dominic were fueling open relationship gatherings and pressuring employees to lie, that was a serious breach of professional conduct and possibly legal boundaries. I rubbed my temples. "Kara, do you have any proof? Emails, messages, anything linking Conrad to this?" She hesitated. "I might. I get copied on some email threads. I've seen Conrad schedule team-building nights that are clearly not official. But it's tricky. He never writes anything incriminating directly. The real proof is in how many employees rotate through these events, how some come back to work the next day bragging about hooking up. I can see if anyone else is willing to talk. Problem is, fear keeps them quiet. It made sense. People needed their jobs. They wouldn't want to jeopardize their livelihoods by testifying. "What about you?" I asked softly. "Aren't you afraid?" Her eyes gleamed with resolve. "I am, but I'm also sick of the toxic environment. I've kept my head down, but now I see how they're using Celeste, egging her on to tear down her own family for their own advantage. It's gross." I couldn't stay silent. I offered a small, grateful nod. "Kara, if you're willing, my attorney might want to speak with you, confidentially. Maybe a sworn statement about Conrad's role. No pressure if you're not comfortable." She grimaced. "I'll think about it. I want to do the right thing, but I need to be careful." My chest felt heavy, but I mustered a reassuring tone. "Of course. Any help is valuable. Here's my card and Deborah's card, too. If you decide to speak with her, she'll protect your anonymity as much as possible." Kara took the cards, slipping them into her purse. The waitress came by, refilled my coffee, and asked if Kara wanted anything. She politely declined, glancing at the clock. "I need to go. If Conrad finds out I met you, it could get ugly." We stood and I extended my hand. "Thank you for taking the risk. I appreciate it more than you know." Kara shook my hand briskly, shooting me a final look of determination. "Good luck, Adrian. You're going to need it." With that, she hurried out. I sank back into the booth, sipping my lukewarm coffee, mind racing. Conrad Milton. The name suddenly loomed large in the meltdown of my marriage. If I could prove he fostered a toxic work culture that encouraged illicit relationships and lies, it might bolster my legal stance. Deborah had mentioned a possible civil suit if the call center's environment contributed to the affair. This new information could be a gold mine. Leaving the diner, I felt a cautious optimism. Between Winston's surveillance, the footage from the group confrontation, and now an insider whistleblower, the puzzle pieces were lining up. And with Celeste's credibility undermined by her failed restraining order gambit, I sensed she was teetering on the edge of total exposure. She and Dominic, even Conrad, might soon discover they weren't the only ones capable of orchestrating a plan. In the quiet drive home, I resolved to keep pushing forward, for Ethan's sake, if nothing else. The next step was obvious: share Kara's info with Deborah. The stage was set for a new angle of legal confrontation, one that could shake Celeste's workplace to its core. As I pulled into my driveway, I realized how far I'd come from the bewildered husband I'd been when I first saw Celeste's suspicious photos. Now I was well into the throes of systematic revenge, gathering allies and stacking evidence like a carefully laid trap. One misstep from Celeste or her enablers, and everything would tumble on their side, not mine. I stood in the courthouse corridor, stomach twisting as I glanced at the tall double doors leading into the final divorce hearing. A metal bench along the wall offered little comfort, squeaking each time I shifted my weight. Deborah Langley, my attorney, was quietly reviewing a file of documents. We'd been here before for restraining orders and preliminary motions, but this hearing felt pivotal. Everything we'd done, camera footage, depositions, digging into Celeste's group, had led to this. The clerk opened the doors and we entered the courtroom. Warm overhead lights shone on the polished wood benches. Celeste was already seated at a table with her attorney, a wiry man in a crisp black suit. She avoided my gaze, her eyes fixed on the scattered notes in front of her. My heart clenched at the memory of better times, but I forced myself to focus. My son, Ethan, was at stake. When the judge took her seat, the air seemed to thicken. I glanced behind me at Winston Keene, my private investigator, who gave a small nod. His laptop was ready with carefully organized video clips. Next to him was Kara Jensen, the call center employee who had stepped forward about Conrad Milton's shady workplace environment. Though this portion of the hearing centered primarily on custody, Kara's potential testimony might reinforce how Celeste's behavior was shaped by manipulative influences. The opposing attorney rose first, projecting confidence. He claimed that Celeste simply wanted to co-parent without Adrian's intimidation tactics, painting her as a mother unfairly maligned by my obsession with proving her wrongdoing. He insisted Celeste had turned away from her previous lifestyle, was remorseful, and needed equal custody to maintain her bond with Ethan. The judge's eyes flicked to Deborah, wordlessly inviting our response. Deborah cleared her throat. Your Honor, we're here because Mr. Fisher seeks primary custody. We intend to show that Miss Fisher's continued involvement with a toxic social circle, particularly Dominic Gray, poses instability for Ethan. We'll also demonstrate Miss Fisher's pattern of false statements, including the dismissed restraining order, undermines her fitness for co-parenting responsibilities. A slight ripple passed through the room. Celeste's jaw tightened, her knuckles going white as she gripped a pen. The judge gestured for Deborah to call witnesses. Winston was up first. Taking the stand, Winston explained how he lawfully placed cameras in common areas of the marital home, clarifying that I co-owned the residence and had a legal right to record these spaces. Step by step, Deborah guided him through the essential footage: Celeste's late-night meetings with Dominic, her involvement in forcibly confiscating my phone, and most critically, the lack of any abusive behavior from me. The judge watched the short clips on a monitor, brows knitting with disapproval at Celeste's actions. Celeste's attorney rose to cross-examine, accusing Winston of spying. Winston kept his composure, emphasizing that all cameras were installed in compliance with privacy laws solely to protect me, and by extension, Ethan, from escalations. The attorney tried to imply Winston edited footage selectively, but Winston calmly presented timestamps and logs. The cross-examination sputtered. Next, Deborah called Kara Jensen. Celeste's eyes widened. She clearly hadn't expected her co-worker to show. Kara, visibly nervous, explained how Conrad Milton and Dominic Gray orchestrated team-building events that blurred lines between socializing and sexual encounters. She described overhearing Celeste discuss using false allegations to gain leverage in our divorce. The hush in the courtroom was deafening when Kara recounted how employees were encouraged to lie if it served the manager's interests. Celeste's attorney tried to discredit Kara as a disgruntled employee, but Deborah produced a handful of emails vague but suggestive, arranging after-hours mixers. While short of a smoking gun for the corporate angle, it added weight to the argument that Celeste wasn't acting in a child's best interest, but rather succumbing to questionable guidance from her social circle. At last I took the stand, hands clammy despite my steady voice. Deborah asked me about my daily routine with Ethan, how I'd balanced my job with childcare, and my reasons for seeking primary custody. I need to ensure Ethan's environment is stable, I said, voice trembling with sincerity. In recent months, Celeste's actions bringing Dominic into our home, the intimidation I've experienced, the false claims have shown me she's not prioritizing Ethan's well-being. I'm not saying she doesn't love him, but these behaviors are harmful. The judge's gaze was difficult to read, but she seemed attentive. When it was Celeste's attorney's turn, he tried to corner me about camera installations. I repeated that it was to protect myself and gather truth. He also pressed on whether I was motivated by revenge. Summoning calm, I replied, I simply want to protect my child. If Celeste had been honest and put Ethan first, we wouldn't be here. Celeste then briefly took the stand. She started tearfully, claiming she'd broken off ties with Dominic and only wanted to share custody. But under Deborah's questioning, she was forced to acknowledge the recent footage of Dominic visiting her at night. The room fell silent as Celeste stumbled for an explanation. She tried to downplay it. He just needed a place to crash. I was being a friend. The judge's expression hardened, clearly skeptical. Finally, both sides delivered closing statements. Celeste's team insisted that while she'd made mistakes, joint custody was necessary for Ethan's emotional health. Deborah hammered home the string of deceit, the toxic influences, and the best interests of the child. The judge leaned forward on her bench, hands folded. I'll take a brief recess to review my notes and these video exhibits. The bailiff announced a 20-minute break. We stepped outside. Deborah turned to me, whispering, It's looking good, but let's not celebrate yet. I found Winston in the hall, thanking him. He squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. Kara hovered near the water fountain, offering a tense nod. Across the corridor, Celeste conferred with her attorney, looking pale and anxious. When the judge resumed the bench, her voice was steady and firm. I have weighed the evidence and observed the parties' credibility. The child's best interests require a stable, conflict-free environment. Given Miss Fisher's recent misrepresentations, continued involvement with questionable associates, and attempts to mislead the court, I find it appropriate to grant Mr. Fisher primary custody." She paused as a slight gasp came from Celeste's table. "Miss Fisher will receive restricted visitation, subject to agreed-upon terms. This court strongly encourages Miss Fisher to separate herself from any detrimental social influences, given the seriousness of her conduct." Relief cascaded over me, though it was tinged with sorrow. We'd begun this marriage with hope, and here it lay in shambles. The judge concluded, "We will next address financial arrangements and finalize the divorce decree." The hearing's official end was announced. I briefly caught Celeste's eye. A swirl of regret, anger, and defeat flickered there, but I turned away. Ethan was safe, and I had to cling to that victory, even if it came at the cost of the love I once knew. The formalities of the custody ruling led straight into the divorce's financial implications. We reconvened in the same courtroom, a subdued hush settling over the space. I caught a glimpse of Celeste at her attorney's side, shoulders tense, hair pulled into a tight bun as if she were bracing for impact. My own nerves still rattled from the judge's decisive custody announcement, but Deborah's calm presence anchored me. The judge flipped through documents. Addressing the matter of alimony, the court recognizes Miss Fisher's part-time employment at a call center. Mr. Fisher, on the other hand, has a stable income as a production manager. Normally, alimony helps the lower-earning spouse maintain some continuity, especially after a longer marriage. However the judge paused to peer at Celeste, Miss Fisher's conduct heavily influences this court's decision. A faint rustle passed among the attorneys. Celeste stared at her hands, knuckles white. The judge continued, "Miss Fisher's proven dishonesty and extramarital involvement demonstrated by documented evidence reduces the court's willingness to award substantial spousal support." I stole a glance at Deborah, who offered the slightest nod. This was the result we'd hoped for. Fairness that took into account Celeste's betrayal. The judge specified an amount that, while not negligible, was far lower than Celeste's side had initially demanded. "Alimony will be set at a modest figure for a limited duration," the judge declared, "and shall terminate if Miss Fisher cohabitates with another partner or upon the standard timeline established by state law." A murmur spread as the clerk typed the final notes into the record. Celeste's eyes shimmered with tears, and for a moment, I felt an unwelcome pang of pity. We had loved each other once. Now, we were reduced to ledger lines in a courtroom. But I reminded myself of the night spent alone, the betrayal with Dominic, her attempts to sabotage me through false abuse claims. Pity receded quickly. The judge also addressed child support, acknowledging that I held primary custody. "Miss Fisher, you will provide a modest portion of child support given your income, and Mr. Fisher remains responsible for the bulk of Ethan's expenses. Should your financial circumstances change, you may file for adjustments under normal procedures." Deborah leaned over to whisper, "This is about as favorable as we could get." I nodded, a swirl of relief and sadness flooding me. The legal end of our marriage loomed large, but it also opened a door. I could finally start moving forward, free from the labyrinth of Celeste's lies. Ethan and I had a future without the group's shadowy influence. The judge finalized the decree, a crisp, "Fisher versus Fisher is hereby concluded." My heart pounded at the phrase. We were officially divorced. Celeste's head bowed. She and her attorney hastily gathered their papers. Deborah and I stepped outside the courtroom where Winston gave me a subdued thumbs-up. Kara, the co-worker, wasn't present for this segment, having only provided testimony on Celeste's questionable environment. In the hallway, reporters were nowhere in sight. This wasn't a high-profile case in the grand scheme of things. But for me, it felt colossal. I had custody of Ethan, minimal alimony obligations, and a measure of vindication after the false accusations. My victory, however, carried a heavy emotional toll. Once I told Celeste I loved her. Now the court had severed that bond. Deborah sighed, snapping her briefcase shut. "I know it's bittersweet, Adrian. But from a legal perspective, this outcome is solid. You're in a strong position going forward." "Thank you," I managed to say, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You've been a huge help." Her gentle smile conveyed empathy. "Take a moment, then let's discuss next steps. Kara's information about the call center could lead to another suit, if you want to pursue it." I blinked, recalling the swirl of allegations about Conrad Milton and the toxic corporate culture. Right. We discussed that possibility. Does it still make sense to go after them? Deborah's gaze flickered. We have ample evidence suggesting that environment actively fueled infidelity and unethical behavior. You'd have grounds for a civil lawsuit if we prove it contributed to your marital breakdown and any emotional distress. I nodded, glancing around the corridor. Celeste was nowhere in sight, presumably off to nurse her wounds or lash out at Dominic. My heart twisted at the thought of her bitterness, but bitterness was mutual. Let's talk about it, I said. For now, I just want to get through today. We stepped outside into the bright, late afternoon sun. Winston fell in step beside us, hooking an arm around his laptop bag. Congratulations, Adrian. I know it wasn't an easy road. Deborah turned to him. Did you catch Celeste's face when the judge read the visitation conditions? She was shocked. Winston shrugged. Couldn't blame the judge after seeing all that footage. If she tries anything else, we have the entire folder to refute her. I exhaled slowly. The triad of Winston's investigation, Deborah's legal acumen, and Kara's inside information had fortified my defenses. Celeste had played dirty, but we'd managed to outmaneuver her. For a moment, my mind flashed to Ethan how I'd pick him up from daycare that evening and tell him we'd still be together, that everything would be okay. I couldn't pretend to him that none of this ever happened, but at least I could assure him I'd be by his side. We parted ways at the parking lot. Deborah promised to draft the final paperwork for me to sign. Winston reminded me to store all our evidence for any future disputes. Alone in my car, I gripped the steering wheel, letting the magnitude of what just happened seep in. The phone buzzed. A message from Sharon, my neighbor who often helped watch Ethan. He's doing fine, coloring right now. Take your time, we're good here. My chest tightened with gratitude. Without her small acts of kindness, this ordeal might have been 10 times harder. I typed a quick reply and started the engine. Driving away from the courthouse, I half expected tears or an onslaught of relief, but all I felt was a strange numbness. My marriage was legally over. The judge's words kept echoing. Primary custody, minimal alimony, false statements. It was a victory, no doubt, but it came at the cost of the life I'd once imagined, a stable 2-parent home for Ethan, a loving partnership. Gone. Stopping at a red light, I allowed a small wave of sadness to wash through me. The sense of betrayal might never fully vanish, yet I understood that winning custody was about more than punishing Celeste. It was about ensuring that Ethan had a secure upbringing. One day I hoped he'd understand I'd done my best to shield him from the chaos of his mother's decisions. When the light turned green, I drove on, mind shifting to the next stage. Despite the verdict, there remained that unresolved matter of the call center's role, especially with Conrad Milton's shady operations. It hovered like a separate storm cloud, ready to burst, but for this moment, I simply clenched the steering wheel, inhaling the crisp air of freedom from a toxic marriage. My job now was to find a sliver of normalcy for me and my son, however complicated it might be. 2 weeks drifted by in a mixture of relief and apprehension. Ethan and I were settling into a routine morning cartoons, daycare drop-offs, late-night dinners when my shift ran long. The home felt calmer with Celeste no longer around, though her infrequent visits for supervised child exchanges carried a tense undercurrent. She kept to the court order. Short, restricted appearances, returning Ethan promptly. Beyond that, we barely interacted. Amid these changes, my thoughts kept returning to Conrad Milton and the environment at the call center. Kara Jensen had provided more details to Deborah through a brief sworn statement. She painted a grim picture of a manager who encouraged certain employees like Dominic to blur professional lines, hosting social mixers that often led to intimate encounters and hush-hush alliances. The deeper we looked, the more it appeared that these entanglements directly affected Celeste's choices. So during a strategy meeting in Deborah's downtown office, we sat across a polished oak table, discussing whether to proceed with a lawsuit. The room smelled faintly of fresh coffee, and Deborah was meticulously flipping through pages in a binder labeled Fisher v. Metroline Services, the call center's parent company. "All right," Deborah began, adjusting her reading glasses. We have multiple depositions from employees who confirm that Conrad fosters let's call it a toxic adult environment. He apparently pairs new hires with mentors who double as party recruiters. Dominic was one such mentor, and we have strong indications that Miss Fisher was heavily influenced to join these gatherings, leading to her affair. That, in turn, caused the breakdown of the marriage. Winston, seated next to me, tapped a finger on the table. The question is, can we hold the company liable for Celeste's personal decisions? Deborah nodded. That's the crux. We need to show that Metro Line Services either knew or should have known about this environment and that it reasonably contributed to your marital collapse and emotional distress. Typically, a workplace is not responsible for employees' personal entanglements. But if we show a pattern of management actively promoting these encounters, particularly by Conrad, then it's borderline harassment or a violation of company policy that they've turned a blind eye to. I rubbed my temples, the dull throb of a tension headache forming. I'm not trying to get petty revenge, but their negligence shattered my family. I can't just let them keep doing it to others. Deborah's expression softened. Understood. We have enough to file a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress or negligent supervision. It won't be simple. Big companies fight aggressively, especially if we're seeking damages. But with Kara's testimony, plus depositions from employees who want to talk, we might corner them into a settlement. A knock sounded at the door. Brianna, Deborah's paralegal, poked her head in. Miss Langley, I have an updated contact list for employees who might cooperate. She handed a few sheets over. Glancing down, I saw several names I recognized from Celeste's casual mentions. Deborah let out a low whistle. This is more than expected. Looks like multiple employees have complained about Conrad's mixers. Some are even alleging intimidation if they refuse to attend. That's powerful evidence. Winston nudged the sheets with interest. If these folks are willing to be deposed under oath, the company will be in hot water. I cleared my throat. Let's do it then. I'm ready to file. I'll stand by any statement needed. Deborah clicked her pen. We'll draft a complaint. Once served, Metro Line will likely respond with denial. Then we'll enter discovery, where we can request internal emails, policies, everything. That's where we might find the smoking gun, evidence that management knowingly allowed or even encouraged these exploitative social gatherings. The plan set, I left the office feeling a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. Filing against a large employer was daunting, but the potential for accountability felt justified. Within a week, we'd formally served Metro Line Services with a lawsuit. Media coverage was minimal at first, but local business blogs picked up on the story. One morning, I woke to find an email from a small online publication requesting comment. They'd heard rumors of illicit corporate culture and open marriage circles at the call center. I politely declined an interview. The last thing I needed was a public fiasco that might traumatize Ethan. Deborah agreed. Better to keep this quiet unless it became unavoidable. Soon after, discovery began. Metro Line's legal team responded with a predictable denial. They claimed they had no knowledge of unsanctioned mixers and that Conrad Milton was a respected manager. But as depositions commenced, cracks appeared in the corporate facade. A handful of employees, emboldened by anonymity or departing from the company, described situations eerily similar to Kara's. Drinks, dancing, hooking up, all under Conrad's watchful eye. I read through transcripts, stomach churning, as one staffer recounted how Conrad implied she'd be overlooked for promotions if she didn't join a weekend trip. Another described Dominic's role as a recruiter for a secret clique, pressuring new hires to loosen up. My mind flashed back to Celeste's transformation and how quickly her behavior changed under Dominic's mentorship. Deborah called me after collecting several depositions. Their stories align with Kara's. It's looking more like a strong pattern of management wrongdoing. Metro Line's attorneys seem rattled. Good, I said, though I felt a pang remembering Celeste. She was no longer my responsibility, but thinking about how deeply she'd fallen into this moral quicksand made me both resentful and sad. Deborah pressed on. Next step, we request internal emails and meeting minutes. They'll try to limit what we see, but if we find anything referencing these parties or hush money, that's powerful. I suspect they'll aim to settle. Public litigation could harm them worse. Sure enough, a few days later, Metroline's team proposed a settlement meeting. They insisted none of the allegations were true, but begrudgingly acknowledged that some employees might have overstepped. Deborah, Winston, and I prepared meticulously organizing depositions, emails, and time-stamped chats. Our goal was accountability, plus damages for the emotional fallout from Celeste's involvement. At times, I caught myself wondering if I was venturing too far down a path of vengeance. But then I recalled Celeste's final months living in that environment, her manipulation, the intimidation from Dominic's group, the humiliating confrontation in my own living room. This wasn't just about me. It was about exposing a system that lured unsuspecting spouses into destructive behaviors and then covered its tracks. When settlement day arrived, we convened in a sleek, glass-walled conference room at a neutral downtown office. Metroline's representatives arrived looking tense but polite, armed with binders and guarded smiles. My heart pounded. The next few hours would determine whether we reached a deal or ended up in a drawn-out courtroom drama. As we exchanged cautious introductions, I couldn't help but notice that Conrad Milton himself wasn't present. Perhaps a strategic choice by the company's lawyers keep the figurehead out of sight, but it only fed my resolve. He had to face consequences. If the settlement discussions failed, we'd see him on the stand. I glanced at Deborah, who flashed me a reassuring look. No matter how big Metroline was, we had the truth on our side. My phone buzzed quietly, a text from my babysitter letting me know Ethan was safe at home. I clenched my jaw, letting that thought bolster me. I'm doing this for both of us, I reminded myself, stepping forward to greet the other attorneys. The negotiations were about to begin. The air in the conference room felt charged, each breath heavy with tension. I sat on one side of the oblong table with Deborah and Winston, while Metroline's legal team occupied the opposite side. At the head of the table sat a neutral mediator, an older gentleman with silver hair and a calm demeanor. Copies of depositions, emails, and policy documents were stacked in neat piles, waiting to be dissected. Metroline's lead attorney, a composed woman named Annalise Porter, started by expressing regret for any distress I'd experienced. She carefully avoided admitting liability, claiming the company did not condone inappropriate conduct. "We are prepared to address any misunderstandings," she said, leveling a neutral stare at me. "But we see no evidence that Metroline systematically encouraged extramarital affairs." Deborah cleared her throat. "With all due respect, Miss Porter, we have multiple depositions describing how Conrad Milton and Dominic Gray cultivated a culture of after-hours mixers. Even if it wasn't an official policy, Metroline failed to prevent or rectify ongoing misconduct, which directly contributed to our client's marital breakdown." Annalise tapped her pen against a folder. "We dispute the notion that the company is responsible for an employee's personal choices." Winston leaned forward. "That might be feasible if these personal choices weren't happening under a manager's direction. We have testimony from at least 4 employees indicating fear of retaliation if they didn't attend or comply." The mediator gently raised a hand. "Let's keep our focus on a resolution. Has Metroline considered an internal investigation or proposed reforms?" Annalise's lips pursed. "Our HR department is reviewing the matter. We can't disclose details, but rest assured corrective steps are being taken." She paused. "We're open to a settlement, provided it remains confidential. A protracted trial serves no one." Deborah seized the opening. "Confidential or not, Mr. Fisher needs compensation for the emotional harm inflicted, particularly given the proof that Metroline's negligence fueled the environment that devastated his family. We also seek an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, though we can negotiate specifics." A hush fell as both sides exchanged tense glances. Annalise slid a paper forward, enumerating a settlement offer, a sum of money, an agreement to strengthen HR policies, and a request for a non-disclosure agreement on my part. Deborah raised an eyebrow. The figure was decent, but I could see her weigh whether it matched the damage done. She looked at me and I gave a subtle nod. I wasn't out for unlimited riches, just a fair restitution, plus systemic changes that might prevent future families from going through the same nightmare. Still, Deborah pushed back, citing the seriousness of Conrad's apparent misconduct. "We'd also like to see accountability from Mr. Milton," she said. That he remains in a managerial position indicates the company has not truly taken steps to remedy the situation. Annalise glanced at her co-counsel, who gave a nearly imperceptible shrug. She then spoke, voice measured. Our client is prepared to remove Mr. Milton from his current role. While we cannot discuss personnel actions in detail, you may consider that issue addressed if we reach an agreement. The tension in the room shifted. Removing Conrad from management was significant. It meant Metroline was feeling the heat. Deborah's expression remained neutral, but I could sense her internal satisfaction. Meanwhile, Winston took notes, occasionally whispering suggestions. We paused for a brief caucus, stepping out into the hallway. Deborah arched a brow. They're ready to fire Conrad or at least demote him. That's a major concession, and the financial figure is close to what we aimed for. I exhaled, relief mingling with a kind of somber triumph. So they're agreeing that what he did was wrong, even if they won't say it outright. That's what it looks like, Deborah replied. You'll likely have to sign a non-disclosure about specifics, but effectively, yes, he won't be harassing employees anymore. Winston patted my shoulder. You got them where it hurts reputation and liability. Now they want to cut losses. I nodded. Let's finalize it. I'm ready to move on. We returned to the table, exchanging final details. The mediator's calm voice floated across the tense atmosphere, guiding both sides to clarify wording. Eventually, we reached a settlement. A substantial payment to me for damages, emotional distress, and partial legal fees. Metroline's commitment to revise HR protocols, conduct an internal investigation, and take immediate action on Conrad Milton, effectively removing him from his supervisory post. A confidentiality clause preventing me from publicly disclosing the settlement's exact amount or certain internal documents. Annalise slid the final draft across the table, and we all signed. As the mediator confirmed the agreement, I felt my shoulders lighten. It wasn't an official apology, but the terms spoke volumes. After the session, we stepped outside into an overcast afternoon. Deborah shook my hand firmly. Congratulations! This is quite the resolution and acknowledgement of wrongdoing, money to secure Ethan's future, and an end to Conrad's destructive reign. I glanced at Winston, who was packing up his laptop. Thank you both, I murmured. I couldn't have done this alone. He offered a tight-lipped smile. You fought hard. I just provided the lens. A swirl of reporters was thankfully absent, no sensational headlines, just quiet closure. We parted ways, Deborah promising to email the final documents for my records. Tucking my copy under my arm, I made my way toward the parking garage. Passing a glass-walled office in the hallway, I glimpsed Annalise Porter conferring with her team, faces tense. They had avoided a messy court battle, but their client's reputation was bruised. My mind drifted to what might become of Dominic Gray, Raina, and the others. Perhaps the fallout would scatter their toxic circle. Celeste, for her part, still worked at the call center, apparently. The settlement terms protected her from immediate termination, but the social repercussions could be severe. Outside, I breathed in the cool air, thinking of how drastically life had changed over the last few months. At first, my main objective was personal survival, then securing Ethan's custody. Now I had an outcome that offered both financial stability and a moral victory. The corporate power enabling Celeste's spiral was finally held accountable, at least in part. I hoped it would deter others from orchestrating such reckless mixers. Driving home through light drizzle, I contemplated the next step. Ethan's future looked more secure with the settlement funds. I could build a better life, a new home, or simply invest in his education. The final illusions of my old marriage had been stripped away in court. What remained was a bittersweet sense of justice. My wife's betrayal had ended badly for her, and the environment that pushed her deeper into infidelity was now paying the price. Pulling into my driveway, I saw the familiar porch light glowing. Inside, Ethan's laughter spilled from the living room, where my neighbor Sharon was reading him a story. He looked up, beaming at me, and I felt a rush of gratitude that overshadowed the day's legal battles. The settlement check wouldn't erase all the hurt, but it gave me a fresh start. I'd focus on Ethan, on creating a new sense of peace. As I hugged him, I realized how far I'd come from the moment I first saw Celeste's suspicious photos. Now, I stood on the other side, with an official victory in court and a settlement ensuring accountability for those who had played a part in my family's downfall. The storm that tore through my life was finally settling into calm waters. And while I wasn't naive enough to believe all scars would heal instantly, I held Ethan close, whispering a promise that we'd be okay together. 2 months had slipped by since my legal battles ended. The finality of the divorce and the corporate settlement still felt surreal, like waking from a nightmare only to find faint bruises lingering. Despite everything, Ethan and I had settled into a quieter, steadier routine. No more door-slamming arguments, no more tense legal phone calls. In our small rental home on a suburban street, I noticed a kind of peace I never thought possible. Late one afternoon, I found myself in the living room, flipping through listings on my laptop. Deborah had mentioned that investing part of the settlement money in a better neighborhood could be wise, and I couldn't deny the appeal. My current rental was adequate, but cramped Ethan's toys cluttered the living room corners, and the second bedroom served as a half-storage space for old memories. I craved something new, a blank slate. I'd just clicked on a promising house listing tree-lined streets, good school district when the doorbell rang. Setting the laptop aside, I checked the clock, 5:45 p.m. Usually, I expected no one at this hour. My mind flickered with mild worry. Had Celeste decided to drop by unannounced? Instead, I opened the door to see Sharon, my neighbor and friend who'd often looked after Ethan during my tumultuous times. She wore a kind smile and held a small bag of homemade cookies. "Hey, Adrian. Thought I'd drop these off chocolate chip, Ethan's favorite." Her thoughtful gesture brought warmth to my chest. "Thanks," I said, stepping aside for her to enter. "He'll be over the moon. He's playing with blocks in his room." Sharon handed over the cookies and glanced at the open laptop on the coffee table. "House hunting?" I nodded, exhaling slowly. "Yeah, thinking about moving. Somewhere with more space and, honestly, a fresh start." She offered a sympathetic look. "That sounds like a good plan. You've been through a lot. You and Ethan both." I hesitated, considering how best to phrase the swirl of emotions I'd carried. "I just want him to have a stable place to grow up. This place, it has too many memories." Sharon patted my arm kindly. "You'll find the right home soon, I'm sure. And if you need me to watch Ethan while you tour houses, you know where to find me." I thanked her, and we chatted briefly about daily life, the neighborhood gossip, a planned community garage sale, and the new coffee shop that had opened a few blocks away. These small, ordinary details felt almost luxurious after the chaos of courts and betrayals. Once Sharon headed back, I called Ethan out to sample the fresh cookies. He trotted in, bright-eyed as ever, nibbling happily while I resumed browsing house listings. Later that night, after putting Ethan to bed, I settled on the couch with an ache of lingering nostalgia. Despite the relative calm, the scars ran deep. Celeste had left me battered emotionally, but the final months had taught me resilience. With a legal victory behind me, I felt a flicker of determination. I could turn these ashes into something new. Perhaps that meant a different zip code, or maybe a fresh job environment eventually. For now, focusing on a stable home for Ethan was enough. The next day, I scheduled a viewing for a modest 3-bedroom house in a cul-de-sac near a well-regarded elementary school. The photos showed a bright living space, a fenced backyard with enough room for a swing set, and a small basement that might make for a workshop. Something in me sparked maybe this was the one. By the weekend, I stood on that cul-de-sac, surveying the neat row of houses. Birds chirped in the distance as I walked up the driveway to meet the realtor, Anita Barnes. She greeted me with a warm handshake. She was around my age, with a friendly smile that put me at ease. Anita unlocked the front door, guiding me through the quiet interior. Sunlight spilled across hardwood floors, and I immediately imagined Ethan's laughter echoing in this open space. "I think you'll like the backyard," Anita said, leading me through the kitchen door. Stepping outside, I saw a patch of grass framed by a tall maple tree. A breeze ruffled the leaves, and I pictured Ethan scampering around, maybe with a dog one day if I felt ready for that responsibility. My chest tightened with unexpected hope. We toured each room, discussing possible renovations. I couldn't ignore the pang of excitement I felt. This could be a real new beginning, no ghosts of the past lingering in every corner. The price was a bit steep, but thanks to the settlement and careful budgeting, It was feasible. Back in the living room, Anita handed me a brochure, smiling. I can tell you're serious. Let me know if you want to make an offer soon. Houses in this neighborhood go fast. I nodded, soaking in the sense of possibility. I'll be in touch. Thank you. Driving home, a calm resolve settled over me. I'd talked to Deborah about the finances. If everything lined up, maybe I'd put in an offer. The thought of forging a stable environment for Ethan made my pulse quicken in a good way. No more living in the aftermath of betrayal. This was about forging the next chapter, one free from Celeste's shadow. That same evening, as Ethan and I cooked dinner mac and cheese for him, grilled chicken for me, he casually said, "Dad, will Mommy live in our new house?" I felt the air freeze for a moment. I put down the wooden spoon, turning to him gently. "No, buddy," I murmured, meeting his wide eyes. "Mommy has her own place now." We'd talked around the divorce before, but never in detail. I tried to keep it simple so he wouldn't bear the weight of grown-up problems. He nodded as if pondering. "Okay." Then he resumed talking about a new friend at daycare, his question answered as if it were no big deal. For me, however, it hammered home the reality that our family's shape had changed forever. By bedtime, after reading him a story, I tucked him in and kissed his forehead. He giggled, hugging a stuffed dinosaur. Closing his door gently, I sank onto the couch in the living room. For so long, I'd defined myself by what Celeste did to me, the betrayal, the lies, the heartache. Now, for Ethan's sake, I wanted to define us by what we could become. I scrolled through photos I'd snapped of the cul-de-sac house, imagining furniture in each corner. The excitement I felt contrasted sharply with the anguish of prior months. As the house grew quiet, a sense of renewal glimmered. Celeste had once tried to tear my world apart, but ironically, her betrayal had led me to carve out a new path. And I was done letting her overshadow it. Sure, I still carried bruises of heartbreak, but each day I felt them fade ever so slightly. A fresh environment, a calmer routine with Ethan, that was all I needed right now. The next morning, I called Anita. "I'm ready to make an offer," I told her, voice steady. In that moment, I felt the first real flutter of closure. We were rebuilding, step by step, forging a future without the ghosts of the past. If the house became ours, I'd plant new roots, ones no storm could easily tear up. And if the memory of Celeste's betrayal lingered, it would be only that. A memory, overshadowed by the promise of tomorrow. 2 weeks later, I found myself juggling a handful of tasks that had once been shared between Celeste and me. The difference was that now, every errand, every chore, felt purposeful rather than suffocating. Ethan woke me at dawn with his usual high-octane energy, tugging on my sleeve to ask about breakfast. I groaned good-naturedly, remembering how Celeste used to handle early mornings while I hurried off to work. Now, the entire morning routine was on me, and it felt strangely rewarding. By 7 a.m., we were in the kitchen, Ethan munching cereal, me sipping coffee. I scrolled through the news on my phone, vaguely aware that my mind no longer raced with anxiety about court dates. Instead, I mentally mapped out the day. Drop Ethan at daycare, handle a full shift at the research facility, then pick him up, maybe swing by the grocery store and wrap up the evening with his homework, more scribbles than real homework, before bedtime. As we headed out the door, Sharon, my neighbor, waved from across the driveway. "Morning, Adrian. Don't forget we're having that block party next Saturday." I gave her a quick grin, hustling Ethan into his booster seat. "Wouldn't miss it. We'll bring something sweet." Ethan cheered from the back seat, likely imagining more of Sharon's cookies. Driving away, I felt a small flicker of contentment. With Celeste gone from the house, we'd carved out a new normal. No drama, no late-night intrusions, no group pressure, just father and son forging a new routine. Work that day was a blur of lab tests and production schedules. My coworker Dylan swung by my office around lunch. "So," he said casually, "how's the little guy? Adjusting okay?" "Surprisingly well," I replied. "Kids are resilient, I guess." Dylan tapped a file on my desk. "We're still behind on the polymer testing. Think you can stay an extra hour today?" I hesitated, reminded of the single-parent juggle. "I can, but let me confirm with my sitter." My voice carried the slightest edge of tension. Relying on a sitter meant extra costs and less time with Ethan, but I couldn't always say no. This was part of life now. Dylan caught my drift. No worries, man. If it's tough, we'll handle it. Just let me know. I sent a quick text to Sharon, who graciously agreed to watch Ethan until dinner. It stung a bit this wasn't how I envisioned fatherhood. But ironically, the absence of Celeste had also cleared a path for new connections. Sharon was almost like extended family now, and I no longer felt embarrassed leaning on neighbors. Parenting alone required a village, even a small one. That evening, driving back, I flicked on the radio, some easy listening station filling the car. My phone buzzed, caller ID showed unknown. A twist of anxiety knotted my stomach. Usually I avoided random calls, but something compelled me to pick up. "Hello?" I said, half expecting a spammer. A pause, then a faintly familiar voice. "Adrian? It's me, Celeste." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My heart pounded at hearing her voice again. "What do you need?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. She exhaled shakily. "I'm sorry for calling like this. I just wanted to check on Ethan. I haven't seen him much lately, with the court restrictions." My posture stiffened. The memory of her false accusations still stung, but I also recalled the judge's order giving her limited visitation. "He's fine," I said, voice clipped. "He's adapting well." "Good," she murmured. Maybe I could see him soon. We can follow the guidelines. I can pick him up for a couple of hours, maybe a trip to the park." I weighed it carefully. The judge had allowed Celeste some supervised visitation. Her words sounded subdued, almost remorseful. Ethan asked about her sometimes, but never seemed distressed by her absence. "Let's figure something out," I managed at last. "Maybe a Saturday morning at a neutral spot." "That would be great," she said softly. There was a moment of tense silence, as though she wanted to say more. Then she added, "Thank you, Adrian. Really." I ended the call feeling unsettled. Celeste might attempt to push for more time with Ethan, but she'd have to prove stability. I wasn't planning to bar her from his life, but neither would I trust her blindly. My phone beeped again, this time a text from Sharon. "All good here. Ethan's playing with Legos. Just come by whenever you can." I closed my eyes at a red light, exhaling. The single-father life was complicated, balancing work demands and Ethan's needs, plus the faint echoes of Celeste's presence. Yet a strange calm accompanied each day. I recognized it as freedom. Later that night, after dinner, Ethan curled up on the couch with me, tapping away on his new coloring app on a tablet. I quietly scrolled through property updates. The house I'd offered on was going through final inspections, and I was optimistic about moving soon. I peered at Ethan, lost in digital crayons, and wondered if he truly sensed how different our life was now. I still had pangs of guilt for the broken home, but I vowed to do everything I could to keep him feeling loved and secure. At bedtime, as I tucked him in, he squinted up at me. "Daddy, how come you never have help?" The innocent question almost broke me. Maybe he saw other kids' parents handle things together. I forced a gentle smile. "Because we're a team, just you and me," I said. "We help each other." His small hand found mine. "Okay, we do good, right?" My eyes stung. "Yeah, buddy, we do good." I flicked off the light and closed his door. In the hallway, the hush of the house pressed in. My heart clenched at the reminder that Celeste used to be part of these bedtime rituals, but dwelling on that would only stir bitterness. We were beyond that, forging a new reality, one that included me acting as mother and father, caretaker and provider. Downstairs, the lamp in the living room cast a soft glow on piles of Ethan's drawings. They ranged from messy scribbles to stick figures of me and him. In them, Celeste was often absent. My guess was he either forgot or didn't want to draw her. I gently gathered them, placing them in a folder I labeled Ethan's Art Year 4. Maybe one day, we'd both look back and appreciate how far we'd come. I recognized the exhaustion in my bones, but it was the satisfying kind. A weariness earned from making a warm dinner, reading bedtime stories, and balancing lab duties. The mental chaos from the lawsuit and betrayal had settled, replaced by daily tasks that grounded me. This was the life of a single father, chaotic, sometimes lonely, but also purposeful. Dragging myself upstairs, I paused by the bedroom window, gazing out at the quiet street. Houses dotted the block, lights flickering off as families turned in. For once, I felt no envy for those married couples behind closed doors, no pang of longing for a stable partner. My path was my own. Sure, I'd reflect on relationships someday, but not now. Ethan needed me present, not lost in regrets or fleeting romances. I let out a slow breath, the day's tension easing. Despite the complexities, there was something pure about our nights: a father reading a story, a child drifting to sleep, no drama creeping through the windows. Maybe that was all I needed for the moment. Flicking off the bedroom light, I crawled into bed. No footsteps in the hall, no overheard phone calls from Celeste, just the hum of the air conditioner. Sleep claimed me fast, carrying me into a quiet dreamscape. In the morning, I'd do it all again, waking to Ethan's bright eyes, forging ahead in a life I was quietly learning to love. A crisp Saturday dawned bright and cloudless, the kind of day that stirred a hopeful spirit in me. The block party Sharon mentioned was about to unfold in our neighborhood cul-de-sac vendors setting up tables, kids racing around with sidewalk chalk. Ethan was thrilled, bouncing in place as he clutched a plate of chocolate brownies we'd baked, with me doing most of the work. "Slow down," I teased, steadying the plastic wrap over the brownies. "We can't offer smashed dessert, buddy." He giggled and slowed his steps. As we reached the main part of the street, neighbors greeted us warmly. The transformation from legal battles to neighborly camaraderie was surreal but refreshing. My chest relaxed, soaking in the normalcy of small talk about the weather and a new coffee shop opening soon. This was a far cry from my old reality filled with private investigators and depositions. Sharon intercepted us with a grin. "Perfect timing! The dessert table is right over here." She guided us to a long, folding table where plates of cookies, cupcakes, and pies vied for space. Setting down the brownies, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I recognized Dylan, my co-worker, who had recently moved into the neighborhood. He wore a casual polo shirt, balancing a toddler on his hip. "Didn't know this was your block," he exclaimed. "Small world." I chuckled. "Yeah, it's a tight-knit spot. Glad to see you here." We exchanged a few updates on work, some newly approved product lines, a potential upgrade in the lab, and then parted ways so he could chase after his toddler. Meanwhile, Ethan tugged at my sleeve, pointing toward a small bounce house where kids were lining up. "Can I go?" "Go for it," I said, ruffling his hair. "I'll watch you from over here, okay?" He sprinted off, a blur of excitement. Sharon sidled up next to me, arms folded amiably. "He's growing so fast. Hard to believe he was just a toddler when everything started." I gave her a grateful nod. "Thanks for being there for us. Couldn't have done this alone." She waved off the praise. "We're neighbors, Adrian. That's what we do." A slow hum of music drifted from portable speakers, giving the event a festive energy. I wandered among the tables, sampling homemade pies and spiced lemonade. People from different corners of the street mingled, comparing garden tips or sharing dog stories. I realized I hadn't seen Celeste in this environment for ages, and for once that fact didn't twist my stomach. This was my domain, now peaceful, drama-free. Suddenly a gentle voice broke my reverie. "Excuse me, you're Adrian, right?" I turned to see a petite woman in her early 30s, hair tied back in a loose bun, wearing a friendly expression. Yeah," I managed, slightly cautious. "That's me." She laughed softly. "Sorry, I'm Lori. I moved in 3 doors down last month." She gestured to a modest house near the cul-de-sac entrance. "Sharon mentioned you and your son. My niece is visiting, and she's just Ethan's age, so I thought we might set up a playdate if you're interested." I blinked, caught off guard. It had been a long while since someone approached me so casually, not to mention the notion of setting up playdates. "Oh, sure," I said, offering a polite smile. "That might be fun. Ethan's always up for new friends." Lori nodded, handing me a small index card with her contact info. "Shoot me a text whenever. I'm pretty new around here, so still learning the ropes. Everyone keeps telling me you're the go-to single dad." She smirked good-naturedly. Heat crept up my cheeks. "I guess that's my claim to fame," I joked. "Or infamy, depending on who you ask." She laughed. "Well, good to meet you, Adrian. I'll see you around." She strolled off, leaving me a bit dazed. A neighbor I never met, friendly and open. The old me might have felt awkward or defensive, but now I managed a faint sense of welcome normalcy. People here looked at me as a neighbor, not the guy with a messy divorce. I pocketed Lori's card, scanning the crowd to find Ethan. He was by the bounce house, excitement shining on his face. I watched him squeal as he launched himself into the inflated walls, a swirl of other kids bouncing alongside. In that moment, a wave of gratitude washed over me. The darkness of the past had receded enough for me to appreciate everyday joys like a block party on a Saturday morning. A short while later, the music shifted to a folk tune, and Sharon announced a small raffle. I tossed in a couple of tickets, half listening to local chatter. One neighbor praised a recipe for peach cobbler. Another shared about a missing cat that had been found safe. The simple, neighborly concerns were reassuring, a stark contrast to the turmoil I once faced. After the raffle ended, I didn't win, but no surprise there, Ethan tugged me toward a face painting booth. A local art student was painting rainbows, butterfly wings, and superhero emblems on giggling kids. When Ethan's turn came, he asked for a dinosaur mask. I knelt beside him, snapping pictures on my phone as the artist carefully brushed green paint around his cheeks, adding tiny scales and black lines. He ended up looking like a playful Trex. It was silly and adorable, and I felt a tug in my chest. How many of these small, precious memories had I almost lost in the chaos? When the block party wound down, we helped Sharon clean up stray cups and napkins. Dylan waved goodbye with his toddler. Lori gave us a friendly nod before slipping away with her niece. Eventually, Ethan and I strolled back home, his face paint mostly intact, Brownie's long gone. My heart felt uncharacteristically light. Inside, the house was warm and comforting, but part of me realized I might not be living here much longer. The inspection for the new place had gone smoothly, and Anita had called to confirm that my offer was likely to be accepted. Closing on a new home meant packing up these walls, though I felt no pang of regret, only excitement. Ethan sat on the couch, still a mini Trex. "Daddy, can I keep it on?" he asked, referring to the face paint. "Sure, until bath time," I chuckled, ruffling his green-streaked hair. He grinned. "Roar," he exclaimed, pouncing onto a cushion. I snapped one last photo, saving it to a new album in my phone called New Beginnings. Gazing at that silly dinosaur face, I realized how much we'd survived to get here. The heartbreak and betrayal were real, but so was this gentle happiness creeping into our daily lives. I hadn't given Celeste much thought all day, her once-looming presence overshadowed by block parties and neighbors who cared only that I was a decent father. Maybe that was the final sign of healing. When the villain in your life story stops taking center stage, replaced by simple joys like brownies and face paint. I locked my phone, letting out a slow breath. Our new dawn might not be perfect, but it was bright enough. And as the day's sun angled through the windows, gilding the living room in soft light, I allowed myself to feel something close to content. My heart felt open to the possibility that this chapter, one of normalcy, neighbors, and father-son bonding, might stretch on for as long as we needed, free from the shadows of the past. The following month saw me finalizing the move to our new home, a comfortable 3-bedroom on that quiet cul-de-sac. Ethan was ecstatic over having a bigger yard to play in, and I felt like I'd finally shed the last vestiges of the gloom that once enveloped our lives. Unpacking turned into a cathartic process. I stored old memories in clearly labeled boxes, letting only what I truly needed carry forward. One crisp Sunday afternoon, I invited Sharon and a few neighbors, including Lori, over for a casual housewarming. The event was small, just a few folks, homemade lemonade, and some takeout pizza. No fuss, no drama. Ethan darted around the yard with Lori's niece, both squealing with laughter as they pretended the maple tree was a castle tower. Sharon grinned at me from the back porch. "Look at you, hosting a get-together," she teased. "Quite the social butterfly now." I chuckled, offering her a glass of lemonade. I wouldn't go that far, but I figure it's good to break in the new place with some friendly faces. Soon after, the conversation shifted to random topics. Local events, job updates, who might be attending the next community fundraiser. Even though a part of me still carried the scars of Celeste's betrayal, these easy, everyday exchanges felt like a balm. There were no hushed voices about lawsuits or cameras, no tension about hidden agendas. Just neighbors sharing an afternoon, as normal as any slice of suburban life could be. At one point, Lori wandered inside to admire the living room. "You've got a great layout here," she remarked, eyes trailing over the new furniture I'd picked out. "The natural light is fantastic." I followed her gaze, noticing how sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors. "Thanks," I said, leaning against the wall. I wanted a bright space, something that felt open and optimistic. She nodded, her tone thoughtful. "I get that. My last place was complicated. This is my fresh start, too." I studied her for a moment, catching a hint of empathy in her eyes. We'd never really delved into personal histories, but I sensed she carried her own baggage. "I suppose we all have stories," I said softly. "Sometimes all we can do is pick a better environment and start over." She offered a small, understanding smile. "Exactly." Then, with a quick laugh, she motioned to where Ethan and her niece were rummaging through a box of board games. "Looks like they're planning a big adventure. Should we stop them before they paint your walls?" I smirked, stepping forward to intercept the kids. Probably a good idea. The afternoon wore on, and as the sun dipped low, neighbors made their way home. After tidying up the paper plates and napkins, I found myself alone with Ethan, the house quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. He was curled on the couch, half dozing. I gently scooped him up, carrying him to his new room. Tucking him into bed, I paused to stare at his peaceful face. This was the calm I'd dreamed of, no storm clouds or sudden conflicts. Once he was settled, I returned to the living room. My phone vibrated, a text from an unfamiliar number. Anxiety flared momentarily, but I checked it. It was Celeste. "If it's okay, I'd like to see Ethan next Saturday. Let me know." That was it. No drama, no accusations. Just a straightforward request. I sat down, debating my response. The judge's orders allowed her limited visitation, and I had no intention of denying her if it benefited Ethan. My only requirement was that she abide by the rules. "We can meet at the community park." 10 a.m., I typed back. Then, to be civil, I added, "Let me know if that works." My heart felt oddly calm. Maybe it was the new environment, or maybe I'd finally let go of my anger. Either way, Celeste's presence no longer set me on edge. Moments later, the phone buzzed with a confirmation. "Yes, that's fine. Thank you." I exhaled, setting the phone aside. I was about to head upstairs when there was a soft knock at the door. Confused, most neighbors had left already, I peered through the side window. Lori stood on the porch, arms folded across her jacket. Surprised, I opened the door. "Hey, everything okay?" She let out a sheepish laugh. "Sorry, I know it's late. I was walking back from Sharon's and realized I left my sunglasses here somewhere." I chuckled, stepping aside so she could enter. "No problem. Let's check the kitchen." We rummaged around, and sure enough, the sunglasses lay on the counter near the sink. Lori picked them up, relief crossing her face. "Thanks. I feel so scatterbrained." I shrugged. "I get it. I lose track of stuff all the time now that I'm balancing single parenting." She nodded, a flicker of understanding passing between us. The moment hung in the air, charged with a quiet tension, not an uncomfortable tension, but a mutual awareness that each of us had faced storms. For a second, I recalled the fleeting cynicism I'd felt about trusting people again. But something about Lori's earnest eyes and gentle demeanor made me wonder if there was still space in my life for connection beyond fatherhood. She cleared her throat, breaking the moment. "Thanks again, Adrian. I'll get out of your hair." Walking her to the door, I considered how normal it felt to share a light-hearted conversation with someone who wasn't weighed down by my history. Perhaps I was simply reading too much into it, yet the possibility of a new friendship, maybe more, flickered at the edges of my mind. As she stepped onto the porch, she paused, turning back. "You know, if Ethan and my niece want that playdate, let me know. It could be fun for them." A small warmth spread through me. "I'll definitely do that," I said, smiling. "Thanks, Lori. Have a good night." She headed off down the driveway, and I closed the door quietly, heart thrumming with a strange mixture of nerves and curiosity. The past months had taught me caution. I wasn't rushing into anything. But the slow-motion film of my life, a swirl of heartbreak, single fatherhood, personal healing, now revealed a new frame, the possibility of letting someone else in, even just as a friend. I turned off the lights, heading upstairs, mind drifting to Celeste's upcoming visit. I was prepared for any outcome, confident in my boundaries. That chapter of raw pain was behind me, overshadowed by the certainty that Ethan came first and that I could shape a better life. Revenge had run its course, leaving in its wake the freedom to start anew. In bed, I let the day's events wash over me. The quiet joy of a housewarming, kids giggling in the yard, a potential spark of connection with a neighbor. A chance at happiness, the phrase flickered in my thoughts like a delicate thread. My world was far from perfect, but the sense of possibility felt undeniably real. As I drifted off, I pictured Ethan in his bright new room, safe and content, and me finally letting the doors of my heart open just enough to glimpse the next horizon. The early summer sun filtered through the windows of my new home, illuminating the scattered sketches on the dining table. Ethan, now nearly 5 years old, was in the next room arranging plastic dinosaurs into a line, chattering happily to himself. A gentle breeze wafted in through the open back door. Despite the serenity, my mind buzzed with plans my next big project, one I'd only dared to imagine months earlier. After the lawsuit settlement and the secure foundation I'd built for Ethan, I felt an urge to invest in something meaningful. My job at the R&D facility was stable, but the settlement funds gave me freedom to dream bigger. So here I was, scribbling designs for a small consulting startup that married production engineering with environmental solutions, something that could help local businesses operate more sustainably. I'd even begun recruiting a few like-minded colleagues. A soft knock sounded on the doorframe. Lori, my neighbor who had turned into a close friend, stepped in with a friendly wave. "You're a tough man to catch. Mind if I barge in?" I smiled, pushing aside the sketches. "Not at all. You're always welcome." She cast a curious glance at the table, where half-drawn blueprints mingled with notes on cost projections. "Working on your top-secret invention," she teased. "Not exactly. It's more of a small engineering and consulting venture," I explained, tapping the paper. "I want to help local manufacturers reduce waste, adopt greener processes. Might seem ambitious, but I figure if I don't try now, when will I?" Lori nodded, impressed. "That's amazing. Didn't realize you had entrepreneurial plans." I shrugged, a thrill of excitement fluttering inside me. "I guess after everything that happened, I realized life's too short. I want to create something that matters and also leave a better world for Ethan." She smiled. "Well, if you need marketing help, let me know. I used to do some PR work before I moved here." Surprised, I filed that information away. "Thanks. Actually, that could be really useful. Let's talk about it soon." Just then, Ethan poked his head in from the living room, eyes bright. "Daddy, the dinosaurs want a snack," he declared with utmost seriousness. Lori stifled a laugh, and I grinned, ruffling his hair. "Then let's get them some prehistoric crackers," I joked, leading him to the kitchen. As I rummaged for snacks, I felt a sense of gratitude for how normal and light-hearted our days had become. Where once betrayal weighed heavy, now possibility took root. Later that week, I arranged a small meeting in my garage-turned-office. Dylan, my longtime co-worker, joined me, along with a new hire from the R&D center named Marisol, a talented junior engineer. We huddled around a workbench, discussing the feasibility of launching Green Forward Innovations, the name I'd brainstormed for the venture. Marisol flipped through some data I'd compiled. If we focus on mid-size manufacturers, we can offer cost-effective eco-improvements. But we'll need capital for initial prototypes and test runs. Dylan nodded. "I can do some CAD modeling for the specialized equipment if we land any early clients." I leaned forward, enthusiasm surging. "And Lori mentioned she can handle PR and marketing. We'll do small, targeted campaigns. Maybe even hold a local seminar." The more we talked, the more the plan felt real, not just a scribble on paper. Winston, my private investigator friend, wasn't present, but he'd voiced support. He'd teased that he might consult on data security aspects if we needed it. Over the course of a few hours, we hammered out a timeline and a budget. It was a risk, yes, but a calculated one. I'd use part of the settlement money as seed funding, ensuring we had enough runway to see if Green Forward Innovations could take off. As the meeting concluded, Marisol asked quietly, "Adrian, you sure you're ready for the workload? Single dad? New house? Now a startup?" I paused, letting out a dry laugh. I won't lie, it's a handful, but Ethan is my motivator. I want to show him how to chase goals responsibly, even if it's challenging. My voice wavered, remembering how tumultuous life used to be. Besides, I have a great team behind me. They exchanged smiles. Dylan clapped me on the shoulder, and Marisol offered a thumbs up. It felt good to lead, to have faith in something bigger than my grief or anger. This was the path I'd chosen, expanding my vision, forging a new identity beyond the heartbreak that once defined me. In the following weeks, I visited local businesses to gauge interest. Some were skeptical, but a few showed genuine curiosity about improving their eco-footprint. I discovered a knack for pitching solutions, weaving technical talk with a genuine desire to help them save resources. Each small success fueled my determination. At night, I'd come home exhausted, but the kind of exhaustion that signaled progress rather than despair. One afternoon, in the middle of drafting a contract proposal, I heard Ethan scampering around the back porch. Stepping outside, I saw him building a makeshift fort with cardboard boxes. He spotted me and waved vigorously. "Dad, come see!" I walked over, crouching beside him. "This is awesome! What's it for?" He beamed proudly. "It's our secret base for keeping out bad guys." A pang hit me, remembering how the concept of bad guys once existed in our real-life invaders like Dominic or the group that threatened our peace. But that felt like another era. Now Ethan's biggest worry was imaginary foes. I helped him arrange a final box, admiring his creativity. "Think we can keep them out?" He nodded seriously. "Yeah, with your help." Grinning, I ruffled his hair. "You can always count on me." We lingered there a while, father and son, forging a new fortress symbolic perhaps of the life I was building. Stable, protected, and forward-looking. As evening fell, I realized how far I'd come from the day I first discovered Celeste's betrayal. The storm that once raged had ebbed, replaced by a quiet confidence. A new venture was blossoming, a new sense of purpose guiding me. That night, I emailed Lori a summary of the marketing ideas I'd brainstormed. She replied with enthusiastic suggestions, praising the potential for community workshops. I felt the corners of my mouth tug into a smile. Collaboration had become my new normal. No longer was I a lone wounded man fending off secrets in his own home. I was an entrepreneur, a father, and a mentor to those who believed in my cause. As I drifted to sleep, my mind buzzed with tomorrow's tasks. A site visit to a prospective client, more calls with Dylan and Marisol, and eventually, a brainstorming session with Lori about our launch event. Expanding my vision wasn't just about business. It was about envisioning a life where heartbreak didn't rule me, where revenge had already served its purpose, leaving behind fertile ground for something better. And if that old ache ever stirred again, I'd remind myself that I'd turned my darkest experiences into a catalyst for growth, one step, one plan, one new day at a time. Late summer brought bright sunshine and a wave of optimism until an unexpected letter arrived in my mailbox. Printed on crisp legal stationery, it bore Celeste's attorney's letterhead. The gist was simple. Celeste sought to modify visitation, claiming she deserved more time with Ethan. The judge's original order allowed her only limited, supervised visits, but now she insisted she'd changed and that Ethan needed his mother more frequently. I read the letter twice, my heart sinking. We'd been coasting in a relatively calm routine. Celeste saw Ethan occasionally, abiding by the court's guidelines, and our interactions remained civil. But apparently, that wasn't enough for her. I forwarded the letter to Deborah, my attorney, then tried to focus on my day. Hard to do when old anxieties flared, reminding me of how Celeste once twisted narratives to gain an advantage. Had she truly changed? Or was this just another attempt to undermine the stable life I'd built? That evening, I sat in my kitchen with Lori, who had come over to review marketing plans for Green Forward Innovations. She noticed my distracted air. "Hey," she said gently, placing a hand on my forearm. "Something up?" I exhaled. "Celeste wants more visitation. She claims she's stable now and that Ethan needs her regularly." Lori tilted her head sympathetically. "Do you believe she's changed?" I shrugged. "Hard to say. She's had minimal drama these past months, but I also remember how she lied about me being violent. I can't just forget that." She squeezed my arm, then withdrew politely. "I get it. Well, if you need to talk, I'm here." I nodded, grateful for the support. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I paced the living room, phone in hand, waiting for Deborah's call. When it finally buzzed, I answered with relief. Adrian, Deborah's crisp voice sounded. I read the letter. She's requesting increased visitation through a formal motion, likely trying to show she's made progress. We can contest it if you feel it's not in Ethan's best interest. I raked a hand through my hair. I don't know. Part of me wonders if I should let her try. Ethan might benefit from a better relationship with his mom, but I'm terrified she'll slip back into those manipulative ways. Deborah's tone softened. It's normal to worry. The court will look for evidence that Celeste's environment is stable. If it is, the judge might consider expanded visitation. But we can push for a thorough evaluation first, like parenting classes or a mental health assessment. If she's genuinely changed, she should comply. I nodded, the tension in my chest easing. Okay, let's do that. I won't oppose her blindly, but I need proof she won't hurt Ethan emotionally. Over the next week, Celeste's attorney filed a motion, citing that Celeste had completed counseling, distanced herself from Dominic, and maintained steady employment. They claimed she was no longer part of any questionable group. Deborah responded by requesting a structured mediation to review the facts. A date was set for early September. When I told Ethan that his mom wanted to see him more, his eyes lit up. Really? She's going to come here a lot? His innocent hope tugged at my heart. Maybe, I said gently. We'll see how it works out. On the day of mediation, I left Ethan with Sharon, then drove downtown. My stomach churned with a mixture of dread and cautious optimism. In a small, unremarkable conference room, I found Celeste waiting alongside her new attorney, a middle-aged woman who looked more reserved than the last one. Celeste's eyes flicked to me, carrying a hint of apology. She even mustered a brief smile. We sat at a table, the mediator explaining ground rules. Celeste spoke first, detailing how she'd cut ties with Dominic and the entire circle that once enabled her reckless choices. She claimed to have a stable living situation, a supportive relative, and a renewed focus on being a responsible parent. Deborah asked calmly, "Can you provide documentation of therapy or counseling sessions, as well as your current living arrangements?" Celeste's attorney produced a neat folder of letters from a therapist, a short rental agreement for a modest apartment, and a letter from her employer praising her punctuality. It was more preparation than I expected. The mediator turned to me. "Mr. Fisher, do you have any reason to believe these changes are superficial?" I paused, glancing at the evidence. Celeste looked sincere, or at least determined. The memory of her lies still haunted me, but as I studied her, I noticed subtle differences, less guarded hostility, a subdued demeanor, a slight trembling in her hand. Perhaps she really was making an effort. Clearing my throat, I responded, "If she's genuinely stable, I won't block Ethan from having a better relationship with his mom. But I want step-by-step progress. Supervised visits can expand gradually as long as Ethan remains comfortable." Celeste nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I understand, Adrian. I messed up before, but I really do love him, and I'm not the same person I was." A quiver ran through me, memories of how she once seemed repentant, only to twist the knife. Yet a part of me recognized the possibility of growth. The mediator skillfully guided us toward a compromise. Celeste would undergo a brief custody evaluation, verifying her living conditions. If it was positive, visits could increase from supervised weekends to unsupervised daytime hours, possibly leading to overnights in 6 months. The tension in the room dipped slightly. Celeste mustered a shaky smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Deborah and I exchanged glances. This wasn't a victory for me in the conventional sense, rather, it was an attempt at forging a healthier dynamic for Ethan. As we left the mediation, Celeste stepped close, voice low so only I could hear. "I'm sorry again, for everything." Pain flickered in my chest, but the anger I once held had dulled. I offered a curt nod. "I hope you're sincere," I replied. Then I walked away, feeling the old ghosts swirl behind me. When I got home, Ethan bounded up to me, brimming with curiosity. "Did you see Mommy?" "Yeah, buddy," I said, kneeling to meet his gaze. "We talked about letting her visit more. We'll have to take it slow, okay? He grinned, hugging me tight. Slow is okay. Days passed in a swirl of anticipation. The court-appointed evaluator visited Celeste's new apartment, interviewed her co-workers, and even observed a visit with Ethan at a neutral center. The final report came back mostly positive, citing progress in Celeste's stability. Deborah recommended we allow daytime visits as a trial, on condition that Celeste not expose Ethan to the old group or any questionable environments. Though uneasy, I agreed. For the first time in a while, I glimpsed a scenario where Celeste might re-enter Ethan's life more naturally, maybe even treat him well. If she faltered, we'd step back, but if she succeeded, it could lighten Ethan's heart. Still, the entire process reopened old wounds, pushing me into anxious nights. At times, I found myself pacing the hallway, recalling how Celeste once unleashed false accusations. Could she do it again? I forced those doubts aside, reminding myself how much had changed. I had custody, unwavering community support, and a calmer heart. She couldn't weaponize secrets or illusions anymore. If she truly wanted to be a good mother, then maybe it was best to let her try. In a sense, the conflict with Celeste had reignited, but it wasn't a blazing inferno, it was more like a controlled burn, a necessary step for new growth. Ethan stood at the center, and for his sake, I'd face these challenges again. This time, though, I carried no illusions. I'd watch carefully, safeguarding him from any repeat of the past. If Celeste was genuine, I'd meet her halfway, but no further. A mild autumn breeze rustled through the trees outside Ethan's elementary school, scattering red and gold leaves across the parking lot. I arrived early for his school recital, scanning the throng of parents milling about. Only last year, Ethan was still in daycare. Now he was performing with the kindergarten choir in a short musical program about friendship. My chest swelled with pride. Slipping into the auditorium, I spotted a row of miniature chairs set up on the stage. Parents settled in squeaking folding chairs. The overhead lights illuminated a bright banner that read, Kindergarten Harvest Show. I took a seat near the middle, saving a spot on one side for Sharon and a seat on the other side for unexpectedly Celeste. Yes, Celeste was coming. We'd agreed, for Ethan's sake, to share a row. She was allowed to attend major milestones now, especially after she'd shown consistent responsibility in her day visits. I braced myself for possible awkwardness, but reminded myself that Ethan's happiness came first. Shortly before the show started, Celeste slipped into the seat next to me, wearing a simple blouse and jeans, looking more understated than I'd ever seen her. We exchanged a polite nod. My heart thumped at the memory of our last major public outing together, so many bitter memories. Yet here we were, side by side, for our son's big moment. When the curtains parted, a group of adorable 5-year-olds shuffled on stage. Ethan was near the center, scanning the crowd. His eyes lit up when he spotted us. I waved slightly, and Celeste did the same, tears already pooling in her eyes. The teacher cued some background music, and the children launched into a sweet off-key melody about sharing and caring. I couldn't help but grin at Ethan's enthusiastic gestures, especially when he belted out lyrics with comedic gusto. About halfway through the performance, Celeste leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "He looks so happy." I glanced at her. "He is. He's come a long way." Her eyes glistened. "I'm thankful you kept him safe when I couldn't." An odd heaviness settled in my chest. I didn't reply immediately, focusing on Ethan's performance. But as the applause erupted, I murmured back, "We both want what's best for him." The show ended in a flurry of clapping, and parents rushed forward with cameras. I managed to snap a few pictures of Ethan grinning wide, proudly waving at us. After the children filed off stage, I steered him into a side hallway where Celeste caught up. She bent down, hugging him gently. "You did great, sweetie. I'm so proud of you." Ethan beamed, glancing between us as if to say finally, both my parents together. A knot tightened in my stomach, blending relief and regret. Celeste's mistakes had cost us so much, but maybe we could salvage a workable co-parenting relationship now. Later, we all walked toward the school's exit. Sharon and Lori, who had come to support Ethan, trailed behind, giving us privacy. Celeste cleared her throat, summoning the courage to speak. "Adrian, I know there's no way to undo the past, but it's important for me to say I'm sorry, truly sorry for the pain I caused, for lying, for letting my life spiral. I studied her face, seeing genuine remorse. The anger that once defined our interactions felt distant now, replaced by a quiet sadness at what we lost. I inhaled slowly. I appreciate that. I can't forget the damage, but I believe you're trying to make amends. Her voice caught. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? A long moment passed. My mind reeled, recalling all the betrayals. Then I remembered Winston's footage, the court battles, her attempts to keep me from Ethan. For a time, I thrived on vengeance. But after everything, I'd tasted the calm of letting go. I think in my own way I have, I said quietly. It's not about forgetting. It's about not letting anger rule my life anymore. She let out a shaky breath, tears falling. I felt a pang of empathy. We'd both been trapped in a web of lies once. Now we stood in a hallway, each carrying scars. But at least there was honesty now, no manipulations, no side agendas. That was all I could ask. Ethan giggled from a few steps away, showing off a drawing to Sharon. Celeste and I shared a sad, mutual smile. This was the best we could do, a reflection of what had been, tempered by a seed of forgiveness. We'd never return to being a married couple, but maybe we could be two decent parents. Before we parted, Celeste hesitated. I know we're just co-parents now, but thank you for giving me another chance with him. I won't waste it. I believed her sincerity. For Ethan's sake, I hope so, I replied gently. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I stood by the window, gazing at the moonlit backyard. My phone buzzed a text from Lori, simply asking how everything went at the recital. I typed back a short summary. It was surprisingly peaceful. Maybe we're finally moving forward. She replied with a heart emoji, cheering me on. My lips curved into a small grin, thinking how different my circle had become. Instead of Celeste's manipulative friends, I'd gained real supporters who had my back. I sank into a chair, letting my thoughts wander. The bitterness once fueling me had faded into a quiet acceptance. Sure, Celeste and I missed out on being a healthy family, but we were forging a new path for Ethan, one with less hostility. My days of revenge were done, overshadowed by a need to nurture my son's happiness. If that meant giving Celeste space to redeem herself, so be it. Outside, a breeze stirred the leaves, and I felt an internal shift, a sense of final release from the anger that once chained me. I still had boundaries, but I no longer needed vengeance for closure. Instead, I found solace in forging my own life, ensuring Ethan thrived, and acknowledging Celeste's remorse. That was enough. A brisk winter morning dawned over the newly completed Green Forward Innovations workshop. The modest building sat on a small plot just outside town, where I could oversee a handful of startup projects. Today was a milestone. A new piece of prototype machinery was being delivered for testing eco-friendly manufacturing steps. I stood by the open loading dock, breath steaming in the cold air, feeling a giddy sense of accomplishment. Marisol and Dylan helped direct the delivery crew. Nearby, Lori checked in with local reporters, just one or two from community papers who'd come to cover our official launch. The hum of forklift engines echoed in the crisp air, overshadowed by lively chatter. I caught glimpses of Winston, smiling in the background, arms folded with a proud nod. Our little team had grown into something real. When the reporters asked for a brief statement, I offered a few words about wanting to combine innovation with responsibility. Nothing fancy, just heartfelt. They snapped pictures as we unveiled the prototype, one that used recycled materials and minimal energy. The satisfaction coursing through me was undeniable. I wasn't just reacting to adversity anymore. I was building something proactive, something that felt like genuine progress. By midday, we hosted a small open house. A few local business owners mingled, curious about our services. The conversation flowed easily. Periodically, I'd spot Ethan in the corner, helping by giving out brochures in exchange for high fives. He was older, more confident, asking me endless questions about how machines worked. I saw wonder in his eyes, no sign of the turmoil we once endured. Toward the afternoon's end, with the visitors gone, I found a quiet moment to breathe in the lounge area. Lori joined me, handing over a water bottle. "You did it," she said softly. "Your dream, This company, it's real now. I stared at the bold Green Forward Innovations logo on the wall, heart swelling. Yeah, I whispered. Feels surreal. She smiled. I'm proud of you. We all are. I felt an urge to express more than gratitude and appreciation for how her presence had become a steady comfort in recent months. Yet before I could, Ethan dashed in, excitedly brandishing a cookie from the refreshment table. Dad, guess what? That man said your machine might save polar bears. Laurie chuckled, ruffling his hair. I think he meant it helps the environment, buddy. Ethan's eyes shone. Cool. That's so awesome, Daddy. He reached up, hugging me impulsively. My chest clenched with love for him. Once again, I was reminded how everything I did was anchored in giving him a better world. After finishing cleanup, we locked up the workshop, stepping out into the crisp evening. The horizon glowed with the last of the winter sunset. I felt a nudge at my elbow, Laurie, smiling shyly. How about you treat your employees to a quiet dinner? Dylan overheard and laughed. I'll pass tonight, gotta run. But Marisol might be game. Marisol shook her head apologetically. Rain check. Family obligations. So it ended up just me, Ethan, and Laurie deciding to grab a quick bite at a cozy diner nearby. Settling into a corner booth, we ordered hot chocolate for Ethan and coffee for ourselves. The warmth of the place cocooned us from the cold. After Ethan busied himself with coloring on a kid's menu, Laurie leaned forward slightly. You know, she began softly, watching you talk about your vision today, it was inspiring. I felt my face heat. Thanks. I'm just a dad who got lucky with a settlement and had a reason to do something meaningful. She tilted her head. You're more than that. You're driven, compassionate, and you came back from a painful betrayal stronger than ever. A soft quiet filled the booth. The old me might have struggled to accept such praise, but I'd come to realize that acknowledging my own resilience wasn't bragging, it was honesty. I guess I had a lot of help, I said, meeting her gaze. Our conversation was unhurried, peppered with Ethan's interjections about dinosaurs or the chocolate chip pancakes he wanted for dessert. Laurie responded with genuine warmth, gently guiding him back to the coloring page. Watching them interact stirred a subtle longing in me, a sense of a new family forming, but I was cautious, not wanting to rush or project illusions. Still, the possibility felt sweet, like a half-formed melody I was learning to hum. After dinner, we parted ways, a mutual understanding that no matter what the future held, we were forging connections that went beyond friendship. Back home, I tucked Ethan in, reading him a bedtime story about explorers charting unknown seas. He fell asleep quickly, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I wandered to my desk, flipping through photos on my phone. One from earlier that day showed me grinning in front of the Green Forward sign, flanked by Dylan and Marisol. Another captured Ethan munching on a cookie, wearing a plastic badge that said Junior Engineer. A third showed Laurie standing beside me, our expressions relaxed and full of promise. For so long, I'd lived in the shadow of heartbreak. Now, I stared at these images of new beginnings, the last chapter of sorrow finally replaced by a tangible future. Sure, challenges would arise. Celeste might push for more custody. The business could face ups and downs. But I felt ready. The bitterness was gone, replaced by a calm determination and the memory of how far I'd come. Setting the phone aside, I gazed through the window at the faint city lights beyond. This was the life I'd built after betrayal. Ethan safe, my career blossoming, supportive friends, a potential new romance. A knot of gratitude swelled in my chest, gratitude for the second chance at genuine happiness. With a soft sigh, I turned off the desk lamp. Tomorrow, I'd head back to the workshop, meet new clients, and keep forging my path. In the distance, I imagined I could hear the echoes of a storm that once threatened everything I held dear, but now it was only a faint memory. I was free from those chains, forging my own destiny, with my son and the people I trusted by my side. Walking upstairs to bed, I whispered a silent thank you to whatever twist of fate allowed me to evolve from a betrayed husband to a father and innovator stepping into the light. The final note of my story was one of resilience, love, and a hard-earned willingness to embrace joy. If life was a slow-motion film, The camera now panned across a scene of quiet triumph, my son sleeping peacefully, a new venture thriving, and a heart no longer consumed by revenge, but open to the promise of tomorrow.